Durante 3 años, la educación del mundo se reunió en nuestra provincia. Fuimos partícipes de experiencias de más de 50 conferencistas de todo el planeta. Hoy la situación es diferente, pero no nos detenemos. En este tiempo, traducimos virtualidad en oportunidad y demostramos, una vez más, que la familia educativa, además de enseñar, aprende. Hoy nos preparamos para relanzarnos. Hoy la educación del mundo se conecta en Tucumán. Muy buenas tardes, Tucumán, a toda la provincia, docentes que están ahí del otro lado. Damos inicio a este quinto y último bloque de este cuarto Congreso Internacional de Educación en la provincia de Tucumán para todo el mundo. Buenas tardes, Marcelo, ¿cómo estás?
Buenas tardes, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes, docentes. Bueno, realmente con mucha expectativa, culminando ya esta última jornada, realmente exitoso Congreso Internacional de Educación. Los docentes se han sumado, hemos sido tendencia estos días en todos los medios digitales y eso da las claras de lo importante del impacto y del interés de los docentes para ser parte de este Congreso Internacional. Hemos visto los hashtags en todos los medios digitales, en nuestras redes sociales del Ministerio de Educación y eso realmente nos pone muy contentos.
Decíamos quinto y último bloque, exclusivo de lenguas extranjeras, de inglés. Vamos a estar hablando todo este bloque en inglés y para eso lo tenemos aquí presente a Sebastián Silva, nuestro profesor. Él es coordinador y referente del área de lenguas extranjeras del Ministerio de Educación, dependiente de la Dirección de Asistencia Técnico-Pedagógica. ¿Cómo estás, Sebastián?
Muy bien, gracias.
Contanos.
Acá listos para este último bloque, pero que estamos con muchas expectativas porque tenemos 4 presentaciones realmente de alto nivel académico para todos los profesores de inglés de la provincia.
Nos imaginamos que ya están allí listos, conectados a través de todas nuestras plataformas digitales. Hemos vivido ya 3 días y medio con intensa concurrencia de toda la provincia y no tan solo de los tucumanos, lo hemos visto permanentemente de diferentes partes del país y del mundo. Pero vamos a repasar lo que hoy tenemos en este tramo, ¿les parece?
Vamos a ver qué pasa.
Quinto bloque, estamos en plena presentación entonces y se viene una conferencia muy importante, profesor.
A las 14:15 vamos a estar disfrutando de una conferencia compartida por Martin Hodgin y Anna Britton de Inglaterra.
De 15 a 15:40 vamos a tener otra conferencia.
Exacto, y también compartida por una canadiense y una australiana. Se trata de Svalka Hermanek y Angela Camburis.
Después la entrevista. No se la pueden perder.
En vivo, que no se la pueden perder, a referentes de lenguas extranjeras.
Muy bien, luego otra conferencia pasada a las 16 horas, profe.
Sí, es un conferencista de Inglaterra, Angelos Boyas.
Finalmente, de 16:40 a 17:20 vamos a tener otra conferencia a cargo de
Keith Falls de los Estados Unidos.
Posteriormente el cierre de la jornada, luego la evaluación respectiva múltiple choice y tenemos que recordar cómo va a ser la evaluación para aquellos docentes que se van a sumar a este módulo que hay.
Efectivamente, recuerden que todos los docentes que se encuentren inscritos deben realizar 4 evaluaciones. No basta solamente con hacer esta, la del quinto bloque, sino que tienen que tener aprobadas 4 de las 5 evaluaciones generales que vamos a tener y solamente tienen 2 oportunidades para realizarla.
Es importante hacerlo y realizarlo. Profesor, llegó el gran momento en esta última jornada, en el último bloque, después de toda esta experiencia maravillosa que estamos viviendo.
Muy bien. Bueno, let's switch into English.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Hello, welcome to this module specially designed for teachers of English. My name is Sebastián Silva and I am the Foreign Languages Referent for the Ministry of Education in Tucumán. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for being part of this 4th International Conference of Education Tucumán 2020. For 3 days, experts and specialists in the field of education share their knowledge and experiences with us, teachers from Tucumán, Argentina, and the world. Secondly, I would like to thank all our sponsors, Trinity College of Winton International Academy and the U.S. Embassy for making this module possible and for giving us the chance, the possibility to enjoy 4 high-quality academic presentations with relevant topics in ELT. Thank you, Nori Serda from the U.S. Embassy. Thank you, Erna Burns, Trinity College London, and thank you, Liliana McCann from Winton International Academy, Canada. We hope to contribute with this presentation to reflect on the new school at this time and the role of teachers and students in the new classrooms. The Ministry of Education has a slogan, Educación en Tucumán no se detiene. Personally, I want to thank all of you for the great effort everyone is making so that the learning of the foreign language does not stop. Thank you again. Welcome, and let's start with the first presentation. The sudden switch of 100 online English language learning in 2020 has had a huge impact on teachers and learners' lives in many ways. While there is much to celebrate in the incredible response of schools, teachers, learners, and their families, sadly, this migration to virtual classrooms has also exposed inequalities. This session will present practical ways to help support learners who have struggled to engage with the online learning environment due to weak or no internet connections, lack of quiet, safe spaces in the house to study, or having no home computer. This presentation is in charge of two well-known professionals. Martin Ottingen. Martin is Academic Training Manager at Trinity College London, responsible for overseeing Trinity digital content to support teaching and learning. He presents webinars for language teachers and teacher trainers and talks regularly at ELT conferences. He has specialized in online learning, and he also delivers training courses focusing on young learners and CLIL. Anna Britton is the director of Future Inspire, a successful educational consultancy company which helps teaching professionals and students from around the globe improve their skills and develop their abilities. She's an active Trinity examiner and webinar presenter. She has a clear understanding of global educational needs as her work takes her to all continents, and she delivered training in a number of diverse countries, including Spain, Singapore, Egypt, Indonesia, the Philippines, the United States, Thailand, and China. Anna holds a number of postgraduate qualifications in education, including the University of Cambridge Delta and a Master's in Material Development. So let's welcome Martin and Anna.
Hello everybody, my name is Martin Ottingen. I'm from Trinity College London. I'm the academic content manager there, but I've also been a teacher and a teacher trainer for about 15 years. Even spending some time out there in lovely Argentina, working in a bilingual primary school. So both myself and my colleague Anna Britton are really happy to be here. She'll introduce herself in just a second. But yeah, thank you so much to everybody at the Congreso Internacional, the Educación Tucumán, for inviting us to talk to you today about supporting learners who face particular challenges accessing and engaging with virtual learning environments. We're so pleased to be here, aren't we, Anna?
Yes, we are. Hi, thanks, Martin. So my name's Anna Britton, and I'd just like to echo Martin's thanks, and also thank everybody for dedicating their time and energy to be with us. So like Martin, I've been teaching for many years. I started back in 1996 and have worked, so lived and worked all over the world. I'm now based again in the UK, and I work for lots of different people, including Trinity as a presenter and as an examiner. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here together with Martin, and I hope we can share some of the insights that we've had, particularly over the last few months, with some of the challenges and the learning that we've undertaken.
Absolutely. And, I think we can all agree it's been a challenge, and that's across the board, really. And of course, it goes without saying, it's been very inspirational to see how everybody's responded. But yeah, not without its challenges. But today, we're going to focus for the next 40 minutes or so, particularly on supporting the learners who have difficulty accessing the virtual learning environments that we're all using now. And obviously there are lots of reasons for that, but we're going to focus today particularly on those who have issues with broadband or connection. Perhaps they don't have access to devices and so on, or even difficult to find a quiet place or time to focus on the work. So obviously this is an issue that's not just relevant and unique to the situation we're in now with COVID-19. This is something that will have an impact on our learners' lives, moving forwards, and obviously not. It was having an impact before, but perhaps this inequality wasn't as exposed. Perhaps we were less aware of it, and perhaps that's one positive to come out of it. All of the teachers today attending this conference, perhaps in the past you had some suspicions about students who weren't able to do the research on the internet, or perhaps didn't have devices to do some of their work on the computers at home. But it's a tricky topic to talk about and to bring up. Well, now it's pretty clear, the inequality, and it's clear who is struggling and who needs that additional support. So I suppose that is one benefit. But we know that having access to these devices and to the internet is essential for them now and moving forwards. And without that access, they're going to have a lot of difficulty developing the basic research skills that are needed today. There's a lot of communication and networking that takes place online, which they're not able to have access to, institutions and so on. So it really is quite a significant point. Wouldn't you agree, Anna?
Yeah, absolutely, Martin. And I think what you're saying there about sort of research skills and networking skills, they're things that we build up cumulatively over the years. And I think our worry is that, if they're missing out a little bit at the beginning, we don't want them to fall behind, lose confidence, and feel like that there's too much ground to make up in the future. Because as we know, kids need to build up, younger learners need to build up their knowledge sort of brick by brick, and we want to help them to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably something that many teachers here today are very mindful of, is the impact it's having and the worry that this is probably causing for a lot of the learners and their families. And it's really important that we don't put too much pressure on ourselves as well as teachers, because it's a lot for us to take on board, trying to support learners and families in those difficult circumstances. We do everything we can, but I think it's important to be kind to ourselves, but also to bear in mind and really keep in mind the emotional side, because it's easy to focus on the fact that we need to get these tasks to the learners, that we need them to meet certain learning outcomes and objectives. But I think it's really important to think about the isolation that they might be feeling, and the sort of fear of missing out, FOMO, or all their friends having fun together in the class. And it can take its toll, so we've got to be very mindful of that, but also really bearing in mind that this could have a very serious long-term impact. At the very least, just sort of reinforcing that inequality and preventing them from sort of having opportunities to break that cycle. So we're going to be focusing on this from two perspectives, really. We only have 40 minutes, so we're going to be looking at what we can do practically, and we're going to be looking at sort of pedagogically what we can do as well. So I'm going to talk you through some of the practical suggestions that Anna and I have come up with together in our research. But obviously bear in mind that I'm sure that some of these will be things you're already doing. You've probably got so many amazing ideas, and that's why, well, one of the reasons why Anna and I are so sad not to be there with you, because that's what we love about conferences, the sharing of ideas, being able to hear about your ideas too. So really on a practical level, just based on some research that we've done amongst our own peers and from our own experiences, and also from our online community of teachers, Transformative Teachers. We've done a few questions in there about this, and these are the kind of things that people have shared that we thought had sort of good take-up value and might apply to the situation there in Tucumán. So first and foremost, we don't have a lot of personal power to do very much about this situation. As mentioned before, it's really about wider inequalities in society that are very difficult for us to tackle as teachers. But of course, you know, in doing some research for this, it was really interesting to look back and see that this issue that we're experiencing now during the COVID-19 crisis, people have warned that this could happen, and it's been a major reason why many schools and institutions haven't moved online up until now, because there was an awareness that this inequality existed and that it would limit access for some learners. So at a very basic level, you know, we can sort of lobby our local politicians and organizations to look into ways to address this imbalance, to provide Wi-Fi hotspots in accessible places where there are lots of learners who don't have access to the internet, for example. You know, there are some countries around the world where it's illegal to turn the water off, for example. So perhaps at this point, broadband might be considered a similar vital utility if you need it to access your education. So there are things, little things we can do, sign petitions and lobby, and you know, Anna, I think that you when we were discussing this, you mentioned a sort of corporate responsibility as well there.
Yes, that's right. Tapping into companies' interest and need to develop their own corporate social responsibility. So what we found in places like Africa is that a lot of large organizations are very, very keen to get involved with grassroots projects, actually helping people in the country on the ground with very, very practical, and for them, quite cheap, let's be honest, solutions. And I'm sorry to say that one of the reasons that they're happy to do this is obviously because it saves them money. But you know, we can use that to our advantage. But also as well, it's good for their image, it's good for their reputation. So I think, you know, as Martin said, it's important to lobby and to speak to politicians on the ground, but sometimes it's worth actually approaching the larger companies and seeing if there's something that they can do to really, really practically help us now, in the moment, when we need it, on the ground, which would be brilliant.
Wouldn't it just? That would be amazing. So yeah, absolutely. You know, we are aware that there's limits to what we can do individually about policies, but you know, something else which I found really heartening when I read about volunteer networks cropping up and sort of community action that was taking place. So obviously at this point, you know, we've had mobile phones and devices and laptops and tablets for quite a while, lots of us, and many families have that one drawer with all of the old devices that no one used, the iPhone that gets replaced every couple of years. And you know, it's a very simple, small suggestion, but just trying to join up the dots and if there is a chance, you know, a reprieve from lockdown and a chance to possibly prepare for a future one, then that would be the kind of action that would be relatively easy to set up on a community level, because as I mentioned before, the schools and the teachers are now acutely aware of who the learners are that don't have access to these devices and broadband and so on. So there's an opportunity there to try and look at how we can support those particular learners, because again, we all accept that access to education is a basic right, and if that access comes through a tablet or a laptop, then we perhaps have to slightly reevaluate our thinking there on what we need to provide people. So that's the sort of policy part out of the way, but really, you know, as I say, do dig around and do some research and find out what what's happening out there in communities. There's been some incredible stories, people taking over local TV stations and teachers broadcasting their lessons on local TV, local radio, sort of mobile hotspots, vans driving around with broadband in them so they can position themselves near the houses. So there's been some really amazing responses. So we mentioned before about the isolation, and obviously it's quite an obvious suggestion, but where possible, and obviously taking into consideration any safeguarding regulations within your organization, there obviously it's not only the internet that we have at our disposal. If your learners do have a landline or a mobile phone with non-internet calls on them, so just the regular calls, then that can be a way to have some contact with that learner. And it's not necessarily to tell them the work they need to be doing, or but just to check in with them and maybe tell them some funny stories about what happened in the class that day, or tell them some messages from the students or whatever. Ask them things to share back with the group. Of course, you can call them during the lesson. And we're going to be talking a little bit later on. Anna's going to be going through some of the ways that she's been getting learners involved with her virtual learning environment without them having to log in. They're sort of calling in. So we'll come to that later. So do bear in mind that obviously, I'm sure you're aware of this, but WhatsApp is the cheapest option, as it's free. You just need to have access to the internet. And you can share lots of file types, audio, video, documents, and it's all stored. So it's got a good sort of media storage section, which can be quite helpful. But I would really recommend that really have a think about the size of text that you're sharing there. So if you're sort of copying a 250 word text into a WhatsApp chat box, that might be a little bit tricky for them to read, or they might be fine with reading it that way. It depends a little bit on your learners. You've got to have a discussion with them about it. But I've seen some great materials that teachers have been designing using an image gallery with the text copied into smaller chunks, so that and I've got my phone here to demonstrate, so that instead of the student having to go scroll down and scroll up, they just read a small bit and then they swipe, and they read the next bit and they swipe. And it's little things like that you might be able to make the texts a little bit more accessible if the only way that you have to share it is via WhatsApp, which I know is the case for many teachers. So do bear in mind the fact that anything you are sharing, if you're sharing it as a PDF that needs to be downloaded, then that is immediately creating a bit of a problem for a learner who has access issues, as that can take quite a long time for something to actually download. And there is also then the issue of where that's going to be stored as well. They have to know where they've saved that particular PDF and what that particular PDF was supposed to be used for. So wherever possible, it's really advisable to try and use plain text. So just copy the text directly into the email body rather than putting it into a document and attaching it. That can work very well. So it's really just having a think and having a discussion, I would say, because Anna, in the teaching that you've been doing, I imagine there's no one size fits all as to the best way to support learners who are having these challenges.
Absolutely not. And what's been lovely with the groups that I've been working with over the last few months is they're all very similar in terms of age, in terms of background, and in terms of the workshops that we've been doing together. But what's been fabulous and really fascinating for me is seeing how each group solves problems in a very different way, and what they feel is best for them might not necessarily be best for another group. And it's been lovely to sort of hand those decisions over to them and let them come up with the solutions that they feel most connection to.
I really loved the example that you shared with me the other day about the breakout rooms and how with your learners, I think they were about sort of 15, 16-year-old, these learners in particular, if I remember correctly, and they come up with an ingenious way of getting a learner who couldn't join the breakout room in the room. How did they do that?
So it was really good. I would set them up into little breakout rooms with a task. But invariably, what happened was we'd go into these breakout rooms. Somebody's technology would break down. Somebody would be on a phone and couldn't access the breakout room. Somebody, they couldn't hear for no apparent reason, and even though they logged out and logged back in again. And this is, somewhere where supposedly the Wi-Fi is, is decent, works well. So I was very concerned at the beginning. As a teacher, I was like, oh my goodness, my group's got to stay together. I need to solve all of these problems. But actually, they solved them. They sort of almost didn't need me. And they were like, don't worry, miss, we've called them and we've got them on speakerphone, and they're just talking to the group on the speakerphone. Don't worry, we've got a Google Docs and they've managed to connect to the Google Docs and we're on the phone at the same time. They were brilliant at staying very calm and just finding a solution that worked for them. And I almost needed to sort of stop being, worrying so much and sort of wanting to solve the problem for them. And actually, it was a good learning point for me. I was like, no, these guys are old enough. They have the experience. They've got they know how to find solutions. They're actually problem solving without me getting involved. So in fact, I think I probably learned more than they did.
Which is often the case. Well, it's certainly been the case for me, I would say, with these sort of, over the years, like even back in the days when I was learning how to use an interactive whiteboard for the first time, the amount of times that the students helped, like they were the ones that got it working for me. And so I imagine it's quite similar, but just now we're all in the virtual learning environments instead. But I think there's an important message there, which is that don't ever feel that you have to be the expert in the technology, because I think there's often a bit of pressure there, isn't there? But when you look at the teaching qualifications that exist, they often they don't really necessarily give you too much praise for use of technology, because it's a tool, and it's about the teaching skills that you have. So don't put too much pressure there, but and don't, if you don't set yourself up as an expert, then you have a very nice environment where your learners feel really comfortable suggesting things to you, and they can take a really important message from you there about learning, and it's not about being embarrassed. There's nothing wrong with not knowing something. It's great to ask for help, so I think there's always an opportunity for learning, isn't there, in everything, really?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's it's quite good for us as teachers to show our vulnerability in this area, because actually that's what ironically builds our credibility and our rapport with our class.
I completely agree. So a few other practical tips before we move on to some more pedagogy. So something that's quite useful for making sure that our learners have the instructions to tasks, have the feedback from tasks, and any information that they might lose or miss because the broadband breaks out for a moment. So we've all had that experience where the person you're talking to is just about to get to the important point and it cuts out. And if there are sort of 20 other learners in the room at the time trying to understand, it can be difficult for that learner to sort of express that to the teacher and let them know what they've missed. And so they might not even realize they missed something. So it's very helpful for the teacher that Google Docs actually have a voice typing tool in them, so that whenever let's say you're having your interaction with your learners, you've done perhaps a bit of a warmer, everybody's warmed up and ready to go, and you're moving on to your first task. At that point, you just, with the Google Doc you have open, you just select the voice typing mode, and then you start your instructions, and the Google document will just pick up the instructions you're giving and type it straight away into English for you. Now, if the learner is having difficulties with their broadband access, then listening and having the video playing and all of that is quite challenging. But having one Google Doc open, that's much less demanding on their broadband. So the chances are they're likely to see those instructions coming through on the document, even if they're not hearing you. So they might be able to get on with the task. And I think that's a huge improvement from them having to just sitting there flailing and not knowing if they've missed the task, or trying to let you know. And we, as teachers, we know that it's quite tricky when we're getting lots of messages coming in if a task just started and quite a few people don't know what's happening. So it's another tool we have at our disposal, and it's a very simple one, because all you do is press go, and of course just keep an eye on it, because we know how the sort of voice typing, they don't always pick up the exact word that you wanted to say, or they don't quite express it perfectly, so do double check it. And one last tip, I mentioned hotspots before. So it is possible to purchase hotspots. Now, I'm not, of course, not suggesting that any teacher spends any of their own money, but again, looking into ways where funding opportunities can come up, corporations, campaigning politicians, or fundraising activities within the community. And they're relatively inexpensive, and they can be shared. So there could be, for example, a hotspot that gets cycled around the local area over the day, and everybody gets an hour with it, or we have several of them, and that just ensures that they have a little bit of time to do their homework or watch the recording of the lesson if they couldn't attend. And things like that can happen relatively easy, but they require a lot of community involvement and organization. But there's a few practical tips, practical suggestions, and I'm going to hand over to Anna to talk us through some pedagogical ones.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so this has come from really the last few months, as you can imagine, where I've had to turn all of my face-to-face workshops, training, into webinars. And I was particularly stressed when I was asked to run some face-to-face workshops that I've been doing for a few years now, with, sort of 15, 16, 17-year-olds into webinars. And the other thing I've been asked to do is to work with a lot of younger learners, so sort of 8 to 10-year-olds particularly, and try and get them engaged and with learning online. And I have to say, at the beginning, I felt really quite stressed about it. I'm sure, like you guys, you like your classrooms to be interactive, to be engaging, to be effective. And I was really worried about how that was going to work online. So these are some of the things that have come out of the last couple of months. And if you like, this is my learning. So I just want to share some of the things that my students have taught me about being online and what it's like and how they feel. So the first thing I wanted to sort of talk about goes back to what Martin was saying about avoiding isolation, the FOMO, the fear of missing out. And I think one of the things that's really come out of the last few months is people needing to feel connected, needing to know what their purpose is. And as teachers, I think we have a really strong responsibility to ensure that this continues when students aren't in the classroom. So with all of my students, and I've been with hundreds of students over the last few months, invariably when I ask them what's been the hardest thing about lockdown, they've all said, missing my friends, missing school, having to learn at home, lack of structure, and even, and this is my gift to you, we miss our teachers, they said. I've made them all promise that when they go back into the classroom and they see their teachers again, that they actually go and tell them that. So hopefully some of your students will come back and tell you that. So the first thing I wanted to really focus on here is, rather than focusing on who's here, who's in the room, you know, is so-and-so here, can they come? That elicits a yes, no response. But when we ask, how can we get everyone involved? Pablo isn't here today, but how can we get Pablo involved? Our brain goes into problem solving. And if anything, your students are going to be the ones that come up with really creative solutions about how to get Pablo involved in the classroom. And they're going to want to get Pablo involved in the classroom. So a couple of the things that we've done to do that is thinking about here, we've talked about absent learners being a classroom tool. And this is lovely because the teacher can actually call them on the phone, as Martin was mentioning earlier. You can have them on speakerphone and they can participate in the class, even if it's not online, but they can be there as a voice, adding in their opinions, their thoughts, answering questions. But you can also do it in a sort of a reverse sense, whereby we send them some questions. Maybe the teacher, we record a little interview with them outside of everybody else working online, and we bring it to the class and we use that as a sort of a listening activity, or perhaps using their correct answers as a way to check everybody else's answers. So here is Pablo, who I recorded earlier. I know Pablo has the right answers. Let's listen to Pablo and you can correct your work as well. So you almost bring Pablo in, even though he's not there, he's absent, you bring him in as the teacher. Which gives him sort of importance, makes him feel part of the classroom, and just sends a very strong message to everybody that, you know, it doesn't matter how you're participating in the class, you are an important person in this class. And I think that's really, really important, because one of the things that we need to do as teachers is obviously focus on the academic results. At the end of the day, there are tests, there are exams, you know, we move up, we go on to higher education as a result of our academic results. But we also have a responsibility as teachers to develop the socio-emotional side of our students. And by creating a classroom that is open to everybody, that is gives everybody equal importance, that allows for differentiation. And often we talk about differentiation, don't we, in terms of people's abilities. So we talk about fast finishers or people who take longer to complete a task. Here we've had to move our definition of differentiation into even how students are able to attend our classroom, which is a completely different way of thinking about differentiation. And as teachers, it's really important, I think, that the socio-emotional side gets covered.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more about that, because I tried to imagine myself as a child sort of not being able to go into school for a few days, and I'd be thinking, what are they all saying about me? And what are they must be wondering what I'm doing, or you know. And so actually having a nice positive way of showing them that people were thinking of them, you know, maybe even just saying, you know, at the end of the day, what do you what things today do you think Antonio would have found funny, or what, you know, something like that he can then hear the next day. Just like you say, it makes you feel included and valued, and that really then opens up to learning, doesn't it? Because if you feel positive, it has really positive impact.
I mean, do you remember, Martin, when you were little, if you felt like you'd fallen out with your best friend, I mean, how do you feel? Absolutely, it's a tragedy, isn't it? And we want to avoid that, so we don't want them. And we've got this sort of lovely idea of like some whiteboard messages from classmates, or if any of the teachers, I don't know if you use Padlet, but you know, that's a lovely way of everybody posting a message. And in fact, we used Padlet a couple of weeks ago to prepare a farewell card for somebody, because we couldn't be there in person. So we recorded our messages and our photos using Padlet and gave it to them as a farewell. And it's a lovely, lovely way of doing it, where it sort of collates all of our messages, and we can send them to the person, which I think is really lovely.
Beautiful, yeah, absolutely. And that would be great for lots of classroom activities, wouldn't it? Fantastic.
Love Padlet. For those of you who are familiar with Padlet, I'm sure you've had a great experience with it. For those who haven't, what's fabulous about it is that you can send the link to all your students and they can update on Padlet, and then when you refresh it, it collates everybody's comments and thoughts without everybody having written over the top of everybody. So all the messages are very clear and you can see who it's from. So it's very personal, it's very personalised, which is great, isn't it? So,
yeah.
And in terms of sort of resources and things, some of the things that I've been finding with my students as well is thinking about how we can use our traditional sort of EFL methodology online. And we love a flashcard, don't we? I mean, it's sort of an integral part of our teaching when we're sort of teaching particularly lower levels. And I mean, yes, flashcards can work really well on the computer and we can sort of show them, but there are other ways. And what I quite like about flashcards is that, you can email them to students beforehand. So if they're connecting using their telephone, they've actually already seen the card. So even if it just appears as a little tiny image on the phone screen, because they've already seen them, the link to the meaning is much clearer, or maybe they've been able to print them out, or maybe they've got them on another device that doesn't have, if the connection is a little bit unstable, they can still sort of see it because they've received it before.
Just to jump in, they could also have it in an offline source, like some of the big, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, they all allow you to offline the files. So if they are able to make it to a hotspot where they download those flashcards to that device and make them available offline there, then once they're back in the house, they can use them as if they were on the internet.
Absolutely, which is really good, because if you do have bursts of internet, at least you can quickly download everything. And it does mean as teachers that perhaps we have to be a little bit more organised in the sense of perhaps sending things out, preparing things earlier than we would normally do that. But we have the benefit then of our classes running much more smoothly. You can also do a sort of a reverse flashcard idea, whereby if you give the vocabulary, the student can actually design their own flashcard. And we were talking earlier, weren't we, Martin, about sort of taking a photo of that and sending it in. And we could have a lovely class project where students have got their own flashcards. And I think you were saying something about doing it for sort of lexical sets, like household items.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, obviously they would have difficulty perhaps getting the images for flashcards in their house, although you can get very creative if you've got loads of magazines and glue and newspapers and so on. But yeah, just for sort of lexical cards, lexical sets, just have any old bit of white paper or any scrap paper, they can make them out of those. And they can do labeling, if you've got objects around the house or colors or numbers, all variety of things. They can then go around and label things in their house, and as you say, take a picture and share it. So there's lots of things that they can do that sort of encourage them to interact with their environment without a lot of money being needed. And also, obviously, thinking about what's in their environment. Another thing we love in our field is realia. And there's a lot of that in the house as well, isn't there? Lots of fun things to be done.
Yes, I'm sure the parents are going to love us, because we're here recommending that the kids go and label everything in the house. We're probably going to get loads of feedback from parents going, oh my goodness, my house is covered in English words now. But, for the sake of learning. And it's lovely because those are all things that we do offline. Take photos of them, and if they've got a burst of internet, quickly upload them. And what's nice is we can turn them into things like Pelmanism, so we can do some memory activities using the photos that the students have sent us. So we could do household items, we can prepare a nice little sort of group of the photos, take one away, see if we can remember what we've taken away. And then you're actually using the images that the students themselves have prepared. Just as I'm saying that, Martin, I'm thinking that this is actually a good idea for when we do go back to face anyway. I quite like the idea of doing this in the classroom, getting them to bring in the flashcards for me. I don't know about you.
Anything that means that we don't have to make them ourselves and laminate them, although I do enjoy laminating.
Oh, I love a laminate. True. Maybe they could bring them in and we can laminate them.
Yes, perfect. That's the perfect balance.
Absolutely. So the other thing that I found has been working really, really well, and this is, again, this sense of connection, building rapport, because I don't know if I mentioned this, but the workshops that I've been running, because of child protection, I'm not allowed to see them. So they can see me, but I can't see them. So I work with them very intensively over a few days, and I have no idea what they look like. So for me, I need to get a sense of who they are. And again, to just build up connection, build rapport very quickly. And particularly because a lot of people have been feeling very isolated. So if they've been, they haven't been able to see their friends for a while, maybe they've been disconnected from family. Then we've been doing a lot of common ground activities, and common ground activities are great. So I will, for example, say, okay, into the chat box, give me a yes if you've binged watched something on television, or if you have an animal with attitude. That's my favourite one at the moment, because I don't know about you, Martin, but working from home, my pets have got a little bit used to me being at home all day.
Yes, I've definitely got 2 animals with attitude, and I'm hoping they're not going to be making their presence felt in the next couple of minutes of this talk.
Exactly. I know this is the problem with working from home, isn't it? The pets have become part of my workshops as well. So we've also been doing things like give me a yes in the chat box if you have an older sibling, or give me a yes in the chat box if you've if you had pizza for dinner last night. And one of the fun things about that is it's very quick. People are just sort of connecting very quickly, and then you can ask people to unmute and just get a little bit more information about that. And that's been really building bonds, because people are able to see, oh, so you've been doing that too. Oh, that's a problem that you've had. Oh, I had the same experience. So they feel a lot less isolated and more like they're part of a community. And as we know with young learners, they feel like they belong and that they're normal. And I hate the word normal, but young learners want to feel that they're not doing something that's like really different. It's like, oh, okay, everybody else is doing that. Oh, phew.
Yeah, and I imagine it just gets, as you say, it gets everybody in that much more positive frame of mind, relaxed frame of mind, which we know if they've lowered their affective filter, then it's more possible that they're going to be able to take on board the language you want to cover in the class, or engage with the skills work, whatever it is you're doing. And I was really amazed to hear you say that you found that through using the chat box, obviously your situation probably be quite relevant to some of the teachers in Tucumán, because when there's issues with broadband, obviously removing the video element is the first step, isn't it? And I think initially, obviously you mentioned safeguarding. I think from a classroom management perspective, for teachers, it can feel strange not to see your students and know they're concentrating. But I think when you move beyond that, it's really fascinating to discover from your experiences that you felt that people held back less in the chat box, and you had more of a even spread of communication amongst your learners, if I remember correctly.
This was a really happy discovery for me, I have to say, and it's something that I've talked about with other teachers, and we've all had the same experience. And what we found is that there's much more whole class participation when the chat box is used. So rather than perhaps asking people to unmute, because obviously when you've got a group of 20, 30, I was running a webinar with 70 people the other day. You know, so having everybody unmuted is just, it's not possible. So in the chat box, just asking questions and getting people to engage, it's lovely because people are able to respond in their own time. People don't feel like they have to worry about the words coming out of their mouth or how they're saying things or putting their hand up or, you know, just speaking with everybody looking at them because nobody's looking. This is the wonderful thing. And all of a sudden, the entire class is participating. And what I noticed as well was that people were then commenting on other people's comments. So they were almost sort of taking over the conversation without me needing to do anything.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really happy happy sort of learning. So people who perhaps in the class are more reserved, perhaps need longer to communicate, have the time, because of course by the time everybody's typed something, people do generally need longer to type than they do to speak. So it's leveled the playing field.
Absolutely.
And everybody's able to join in, which has been amazing, and I've loved that.
Yeah. I guess the key point is that you can read back, you can't listen back, you can't sort of pause and rewind. But I guess the implication is that we have to work extra hard on those listening skills as well, and, you know, find other ways to develop those. And I think we're almost about to run out of time here at this point, Anna. So just to finish up, what you mentioned about the muting, it sounds quite fun, but, you know, just to summarize, I think based on what you were saying about the chat box there, it's very obviously people don't get drowned out by more dominant students and so on. And as we all learn in our training that we need to nominate people and we need to vary interaction, but the mute button is quite a powerful tool, I imagine, for just you really need to bring some control back into the situation. And obviously the nominating, just keeping people engaged. They know at any point they might be called in to the conversation. So it's a really great tool to be able to mute and unmute your learners, because they can't dip away and go outside and play in the garden. You know, they kind of have to stay present. And I think at this point we'll probably have to draw to a close, Anna, as we've reached the end of our time here at the Congreso. Thank you so much, everybody, for having us here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and really hope we get to join you in a future one in person in a happier time.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for your time and, as we said, your energy. It's been...
Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed this presentation by Martin Ottingen and Anna Britton, sponsored by Trinity College of London. And now let's go to the second presentation of this module. The second presentation is sponsored by Winton International Academy, enhancing the learning experience by balancing academic and emotional factor. This presentation has two parts. The first part is going to be about experiential learning, and the second part is going to be about emotions. The first presentation, or the first part, is in charge of Svatka Hermanek. Svatka lives in Canada. She has graduated with degrees from University of Toronto and York University, and has received her teaching English as a second language certification from George Brown College in Toronto. As an educator, she taught English as a second language in different Toronto colleges, and she also completed overseas assignments in China and France. Her responsibilities included the development of curricula and delivering intensive English courses for different audiences, including high school students and artists. Welcome, Svatka Hermanek.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever the time is. I'd like to, in a very short period of time, give you introduction to experiential learning, which is learning through reflection on doing. I will go through the definition, history behind the theory of the methodology, And what really makes experiential learning special. I will focus on application of experiential learning to language teaching and learning, and then teaching in changing times like we have now. And then, of course, there will be homework. So what is experiential learning by definition? It is quite simply learning by doing. It's an active process. It engages the learner. It's not a passive process that happens to the learner. So it's student-centered and student-focused. This method can be implemented in all sorts of situations with people from all walks of life, from designing sustainable community or an electric skateboard to testing water in Ottawa River. And of course, we use it for language teaching. For teachers, there are some guidelines that should be followed to make the experience rewarding for them and for the students. I will first go through the history that's behind the theory and methodology of experiential learning. Around 350 BC, Greek philosopher and educator Aristotle wrote, "For things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them." So it's doing reflection, doing reflection, doing reflection. Sounds like experiential learning. His philosophical and educational concepts survived many intellectual revolutions and remained embedded in Western thinking. Then only 1900 years later, the 17th century philosopher and educator Johann Amos Comenius came along. His book, The Gate of Languages Unlocked, published in 1620, is an innovative recipe how to teach and study languages. It brought him to international prominence. He became world-renowned for his progressive views of education and was offered, as a result, the first presidency of Harvard University. Now he's known as the father of modern education, and at his time, he was invited by Sweden and Britain to restructure their educational system. Here are, among other things, the reasons why. Comenius introduced a number of educational concepts, innovations in the 17th century, but currently used, such as pictorial textbooks, maps, charts, and other authentic visual materials. Was a proponent of obtaining ideas through objects rather than words. Experiential. Teaching based on gradual development from simple to more comprehensive concepts. You can call it scaffolding these days. He was a proponent of lifelong learning with a focus on logical thinking over dull memorization. Does it make sense? Yes. Equal educational opportunity for everyone, regardless of gender, age, or social group, was also one of his great ideas. And last but not least, he believed that making acquisition of knowledge should be pleasure rather than an arduous task. The importance of the Comenian influence in education was fully recognized only in the middle of the 19th century. Since then, psychologists and educators periodically rediscovered Aristotle's and Comenius' concept of learning. It was David A. Cole in the 1970s, an educational theorist from the United States, who helped to develop the modern theory of experiential learning as we know it now. Kolb is renowned in educational circles for his learning style inventory, LSI. His model is built upon the idea that learning preferences can be described using two continuums: active experimentation, leading to reflective observation, leading to active experimentation, leading to reflective observation, back and forth. The second one starts with abstract conceptualization, leading to concrete experience, and then back to creating abstract conceptualization, leading to a concrete experience. According to Cobb, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. What makes experiential learning so special? As the definition says, experiential learning, also known as EXL, is the process of learning through experience and is more specifically defined as learning through reflection on doing. Its aim is to develop knowledge and skills through experience. In the process, it increases student engagement by encouraging collaboration and scaffolding between learners. It assists memory retention by building strong relationship between feelings and thinking processes. Students have the capacity to learn successfully and much better when the information is associated with the values and feelings. It also increases students' focus. Those who are engaged and learning actively are less likely to become bored and disinterested. Students also learn differently. When students are involved in the learning process, they are more engaged emotionally, and that helps them experience learning in a new dynamic way. Also, it promotes faster learning, or so we would hope, through reflection and problem solving. Learning firsthand requires deep problem solving and critical thinking. So that is the basis of the experiential learning. Before we go to the next section, which is the application of experiential learning method, think about the following items. What methods did your teacher or teachers use when you were studying English? What did you find most helpful in learning English? What motivated you most? What did you find most discouraging while learning English? And which one of your teachers inspired you most, and why? Okay, the application of experiential learning to language teaching and learning. What is the purpose of teaching or learning English or any foreign language? In my opinion, language is a gateway to intercultural competence, intercultural learning and understanding other cultures. Department of Slavic Languages at the University of Toronto features annual variety show in many languages presented by their students. It is interesting to see a student from Iraq telling jokes in Polish or a Korean girl singing Russian songs. University of Toronto Mississauga campus runs a special experiential learning-based program for language education that usually culminates in a theatrical production in Italian. However, our students don't have to reach the stars. Our aim is to develop through experience student language skills and knowledge at whatever level they may be, and to provide them with a supportive environment. We should keep the following in mind. It's necessary to set the goal at the outcome of the lesson, giving an explanation of the activity, because learning only has good effects when learners have the desire to absorb the knowledge. They have to be motivated. Therefore, experiential learning requires the showing of directions for learners. We have to provide students with tools, such as vocabulary when necessary, materials like paper clippings, pictures, and other actual reality materials. We also have to provide a degree of non-intrusive guidance, facilitation, particularly when it comes to the reflection. You have to ask the appropriate questions, not leading questions, and let the students decide on the answer. The class should be interesting and involve everyone. I think this is a key point. Well, here are some practical examples of experiential learning in the class. You can do role playing of a real life scenario. It's a great experience and could not only be simple, but it's also fun. The goal may be learning and using vocabulary and collocations related, for instance, to grocery shopping or shopping for clothes. The tools would be vocabulary, keywords, collocations, useful phrases, written on the board and pronounced properly by the teacher, or possibly pieces of paper with relevant vocabulary or phrases distributed to students. Materials, authentic material, such as promotional flyers, advertisements with pictures that can be used, or even articles of clothing the students wear. The more advanced students can get to practice present perfect through a real life scenario where they would have to use these particular grammatical structures while communicating with other students and not writing in their books. Students also can create promotional material for a travel magazine to visit their town, village, or some beauty spots in their area, make a poster, and then present it to the class. Here is an example of work of my Chinese students, and the work was supposed to be, or the project was supposed to be, take me to your favorite place. And this is what they did. And then they presented it in the class. Another possibility is to cut pictures from magazines and give students 2 or 3 to write a story about them. You can also add some personal pictures if you want. It worked for me. Grammar can be taught through games like bingo or chain story writing. Have you ever tried to turn your students into teachers? Make them correct each other's piece of writing, looking for some specific errors. For instance, spelling, vocabulary, incorrect use of a formation of a particular sense. They could also be looking for synonyms or some words used, or anything else. Like they can use their imagination, or you can use yours. Okay, what are the challenges of our times? Disparity of resources. There is a large gap between schools with high-end technology versus rural schools with seemingly no resources. However, the same way kids use their imagination while they play, they can use their imagination and creativity in learning a language. Of course, teachers can also be very creative. Another challenge is that in recent years, teacher-student relationship has shifted from authoritarian to democratic. Teachers have become more flexible. On the other hand, some students have acquired the attitude of entitlement, which can be very trying for the teacher. And as a result, more personal approach is required, and frequently a teacher must resort to some kind of a compromise. So what's the answer? First of all, be enthusiastic and creative. Set the goals and explain the task. Give students tools to work with. Give them some guidance and complete the task. And then have fun. Well, I believe that all the teachers deserve big, big, big thank you. The job of teachers in the changing times is very demanding. So thank you, all the teachers, for doing such a great job. After all, experiential learning is all about reflections and trying new things. So please, about this short presentation, and write down your thoughts in answer to the following 5 questions. You can do this on your own time, not during the presentation. So here are the questions. Do you think you're using your positive learning and teaching experience and passing it on to your students? Or do you subscribe to what is the standard teaching method in your school? How? What is your favorite way of teaching? Number 3, in Canada, one of the requirements to retain TESOL certification is to attend a particular number of professional development seminar hours or learning another language. Why do you think these two are equal? Question number 4. Based on what you have learned from this short presentation, can you prepare an experiential learning lesson plan for your students, a specific age and level group? What will be the goals, tools, materials, instructions? The last question, in your school, what would be the biggest challenge implementing the experiential learning method? If you're interested in reading more about experiential learning in foreign language education, the following book explores and integrates the knowledge base and educational practices necessary in foreign language teaching for intercultural competence. And here's the title, Experiential Learning in Foreign Language Education, Applied Linguistics and Language Studies. And it's available on the Amazon. That concludes this short presentation. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the next speaker. Her name is Angela Camburis, and she will talk about how teachers nurture emotional well-being during times of crisis. So please welcome Angela. Thank you.
Thank you, Svatka Hermanek, sponsored by Winter International Academy. And now, let's go to the second part of this presentation. The novel coronavirus has changed the world overnight. We are living through a pandemic that most of us could never have imagined. Today, educators and school leaders are experiencing greater anxiety, stress, and burnout than ever before. Educators are some of the most important professionals in the world as they are responsible for preparing future generations. If we want our educator to be successful, both personally and professionally, school must be the place to bring out the best in them. Emotions drive effective teaching and learning. Angela Camburis wants to share with you why educators' emotions matter, how a greater focus on educators' health and well-being now is critical, and how they can thrive through this pandemic and be psychologically ready to transition back to school. The next presentation will deliver how educators' emotion needs can be supported through embracing a growth mindset, human connection and support, how to normalize emotions, boundaries, habits and rituals, power of positive emotions, and mind-body practices to feel supported and connected. Let's welcome Angela Camburis. Angela lives in Australia, holds a postgraduate diploma of education and bachelor's degree in school and behavioral science, along with other qualifications. Angela is a global leadership consultant and executive coach with over 2 decades of experience. She helps people increase their abilities, improve their performance, and build a stronger culture. Angela speaks, mentors, trains, and writes on the power of leaderships and leading people-centric environment. So, welcome Angela Camburis.
Welcome everyone to How Teachers Nurture Emotional Wellbeing During Times of Crisis. My name is Angela Camburis and I am the CEO of Educación Consulting Agency. So let's get started. The coronavirus has changed the world overnight. We're living through a pandemic that most of us could never have imagined. Today, teachers, educators, school leaders are experiencing greater anxiety, stress and burnout more than ever before. Teachers are some of the most important professionals in the world, as you all are responsible for preparing the future generations. Extraordinary teachers inspire students to become something they never thought that they could actually be. So if teachers are to be successful, both personally and professionally, school must be the place to bring out the best in them. Your emotional health and well-being is critical so you can thrive through this pandemic and be psychologically ready to transition back to school. So what does the current climate tell us? Yale Centre for Emotional Intelligence partnered with CASEL and conducted a survey in March 2020 to unpack the emotional lives of teachers during the COVID crisis. Over 3 days, 5,000 US teachers responded and described a series of emotions that they felt. They were feeling anxious, fearful, worried, overwhelmed, and sad. What they identified was that there were two main drivers, that there was a general fear that they or someone in their family would actually contract COVID, and the stress related to managing their own and their family's needs while simultaneously working full-time from home and adapting to new technologies for teaching. Teacher stress and burnout are not unique to the current pandemic. Research has supported that 85% of teachers have reported that work-life imbalance was affecting their ability to teach. Other research has also shown that at least 30% of teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years of teaching. Teachers were already experiencing burning out and now lay that with a new expectation of becoming distance learning experts. What we know is that you can't control any external events. However, you can control how you choose to respond. So let's look at why emotions actually matter. And there are 5 primary reasons. 1, positive emotions like joy and curiosity harness attention and promote greater engagement. So emotions like anxiety and fear, they really interfere with your thinking. So chronic stress, when poorly managed, impacts on your nervous system and the release of the stress hormone like cortisol. Number 2, when you're overwhelmed and feeling scared and stressed, the areas of your brain responsible for sensible decision making can actually become hijacked. In contrast, pleasant emotions also have shown to enhance mental flexibility and creativity, which helps navigate the evolving demands of living through a pandemic. Number 3, emotions really matter for relationships. So how you feel and how you interpret the feelings of others send signals for other people to either approach or avoid you. Number 4, how you feel influences your body, including your physical and your mental health. So we know that stress is associated with increased levels of cortisol, which is known as the stress hormone, which can impact on your physical and mental health. So when you can regulate unpleasant emotions and experience more pleasant ones, you can actually foster greater resilience during and after traumatic events. Number 5, chronic stress. So chronic stress is really linked to decreases in motivation and engagement, and it can actually lead to performance being impacted and burnout. So when teachers who are burned out end up having poorer relationships with students and are also less likely to be positive role models. So what I want to share with you is a few simple and easy to implement practices that you can draw on to lead your emotional well-being. So number 1, embrace a growth mindset. So over 30 years ago, Carol Dweck and her colleagues became interested in students' attitudes about failure. They noticed that some students rebounded while other students seemed devastated by even the smallest setbacks. Dr. Dweck coined the terms fixed mindset and growth mindset to describe the underlying beliefs people have about learning and intelligence. So when students believe that they can get smarter, they understand the effort that makes them stronger. So what this means is that when you put in the extra time and effort, that leads to higher achievement. So Carol's work on developing a growth mindset has been really beneficial for adults across all industries. Given the unpredictability of COVID, teachers need to be able to be adaptable and to embrace a growth mindset that will assist them in terms of nurturing their emotional health and well-being. So when you reflect on the thinking and attitudes that you currently bring to your online learning or online teaching or even your physical workspace, I want you to consider asking yourself the following questions. When adopting a growth mindset, so is there an opportunity to adjust my thinking to celebrate the learning of new skills? Am I accepting that trial and error is a normal part of using an online platform? Does my attitude impact on how my students feel about online learning? And have I really given myself time and permission and space to learn and make mistakes? When adopting a growth mindset, you can acknowledge imperfections, see mistakes as learning opportunities, and really value learning and growth. So let's look at number 2. Why do emotions actually matter, and how do you normalize or humanize these emotions? So it's pretty normal for people to experience a variety of emotions, especially in response to a crisis like COVID. Some of the emotions experienced may include grief, anxiety, fear, and stress. Many of us will feel grief for the way our lives used to be, or anxiety linked to family, health, or financial worries. What I want to share with you is 6 ways that you can actually nurture yourself and nurture others as well. So focusing your energy on the present moment and where you have some power is really important. So really delve deep and understand what it is that you specifically need and articulate that. Give yourself permission to feel all emotions. Really take the time to notice, name the emotion, and accept that all your emotions are important. We know that when we actually resist emotions, they will continue to persist. During a crisis, working on your emotional fitness will actually place you in the best position to bypass your ego, and especially when you feel like giving up. So holding space for people to grieve their experience and to listen to their concerns is really important as well. So be empathetic and reach out without the expectation that they will actually respond. So perhaps it's sending a text message, knowing that you are there when they're ready to land on their feet and take the next step can really make a significant difference for somebody. Different people are going to require different types of support. So rather than us making an assumption of what people need or our colleagues need, start with where they're at and actually just ask them. Every human being is grieving something, even the loss of what you perceive to be normal. It's actually not unusual to feel alone during these times. So to combat isolation, it's really important to start to share what you're actually experiencing with people around that you actually trust. To create psychological safety in the workplace, it's really about leading conversations. So for example, through your virtual team building activities, where you can actually share your emotions, share what presses your buttons, and really get to know how you individually can best support each other. Preserve boundaries and instill habits. Neuroscience has actually shown us that the brain is far more malleable than we ever knew. Research on brain plasticity has shown how connectivity between neurons can change with experience. So with practice, neural networks grow new connections and actually strengthen existing ones. So you can increase your neural growth by taking some actions such as asking quality questions, practicing, implementing boundaries, and following basic rules around good nutrition, exercise, and sleep habits. Implementing boundaries such as negative distancing is really important, and especially in this current climate. Negative distancing probably can even be more important. Viruses, we know, thrive on connection, and there is no difference when it comes to people who immerse themselves in sharing negativity. Your appetite for paying attention to negativity is part of your evolutionary hand-me-down from caveman ancestors. The way you override your default setting is to recognize what's happening when negative patterns get activated and practice doing something different every time, or if actually something is working, do the same thing. When you experience harmful self-dialogue activities, so when our inner critic comes out, approach your inner voice with kindness and compassion. Limit your contact with a number of negative people on virtual platforms or within your physical environment. Implement boundaries through identifying your limits. So get clear, have clarity around what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. Notice your feelings, observe your environment, and above all, permit yourself to increase your sense of self-control. It's also really important to celebrate small victories and adopt a belief that mistakes are just feedback, and it's really an opportunity to grow. Building sustainable habits. So understanding and building new habits is really essential for making progress in your emotional health, in your happiness, and just generally in life. I want to share with you a strategy for how to build new habits that actually stick. And someone who I often refer to is James Clear, who wrote a book about called Atomic Habits, and I'd recommend everyone to read it. It's a brilliant book. So what James talks about in terms of implementing habits is we start small. So start with a really small habit that doesn't actually require motivation to do it. For instance, if you're going to introduce some movement into your day, start with 3 push-ups rather than trying to do the 50 when you've never done a push-up before. So make it easy enough so you can actually get it done without motivation. Increase your habit in a very small way, so often strive for 1% improvements as part of your goal. So start small and then gradually improve. As you build up, you then break those habits into chunks. So you keep each habit reasonable so you can maintain momentum and make behavior easy to accomplish. For instance, if I was going to implement 20 minutes of meditation, I'd split them into 2 segments of 10 minutes at first. When you slip up, and you will, it's really important to get back on track quickly. Missing your habit once has no measurable impact on your actual progress. However, what I do say to people is actually plan to fail. So when you are preparing in terms of when you're setting up for that habit, think about or ask these particular questions. What will prevent your habit from happening? What are some of the things that are likely to get in your way? What are some of the daily emergencies that are likely to derail you? How can you plan to work around these issues, and how can you bounce back quickly from them and get back on track? We're always striving for consistency and not perfection. It's really about building the identity of never missing a habit twice. So be patient, stick to a pace that you can sustain, and you can make incredible progress if you are consistent and patient. So within the workplace, whether it's a physical workplace or virtual, what I want you to think about is how to actually build habits to nurture your emotional well-being. So how you can do that is through fortnightly one-on-one meetings with seniors to really deep dive into issues that are not discussed within your virtual team meeting. So because of the unique challenges that you may experience, sometimes having that one-on-one time can actually alleviate the challenges and also that feeling of isolation. Another option is to actually find a colleague that you can connect with and when you need to debrief. Some schools have got set up chat channels where you can actually share your interests and celebrate through virtual meetups and build new relationships. Engaging in virtual team huddles when you can share what you've gained from the previous day or where your energy is focused on that day can also allow people to experience a sense of belonging and a sense of psychological safety. Engaging in activities such as lunch, workouts, or weekly happy hours can also make a difference. Another option can be identify how you can actually send notes or a video of appreciation to another part of the school or to another colleague. That can make a huge difference as well. And another option is to actually run a gratitude reflection where each teacher writes a gratitude post, shares it through whether it's a Zoom call or at the start of the meeting. Number 4, the power of positive emotions, gratitude, self-compassion, and kindness. We know misery loves company, and emotional contagion is very real. So when leaders mimic an emotion, it is typically evokes the same emotion within them. So the reverse can also occur. So embracing a positive emotional contagion through showing kindness, adopting mindfulness techniques, and connecting with high-quality people, even in the virtual world, can positively increase your mood. You can invest in expressing gratitude, focus on positive and uplifting moments, or access online resources to help you learn new skills when you invest. You can also help yourself to remain calm, and people around you will begin to mimic that same emotion as well. So how do you maintain a healthy emotional hygiene? Experiencing positive emotions can increase your well-being during unpredictable times. Some simple ways to tap into positive emotions and improve well-being include cultivate a habit of gratitude. When you hold gratitude within your heart and appreciate the value of unplugging or disconnecting, you're placing yourself in the best position to stay in control of you, despite the chaos in the external world. One way is to capture a daily list of 3 things that you are thankful for in a journal, or perhaps before getting out of bed, or setting your intention for the day, and look for what is working in life for you to be able to focus forward. Think about ways to generate joy in your day, such as by spending time in nature, reading a good book, taking up a new hobby, or connecting with family and friends. When we actually share stories, you can actually inspire action. Stories not only enhance empathy, but also encourages kindness, generosity, and cooperation. Sometimes the simple things like asking your colleagues if they need help can make a big difference. Sometimes even just writing a simple handwritten thank you card to a colleague can make a world of difference. In a recent study, researchers found that people who wrote a gratitude letter reported greater well-being after writing, which ultimately triggered more kindness in the same participant even 6 weeks later. Dr. Kristen Neff, a psychologist, often talks about self-compassion, and she strongly recommends that the practice of being kind and understanding to ourselves despite events, as self-compassion really supports motivation and positive change. One of the things that Dr. Neff talks about is taking a self-compassion break. So a practice that you can try any time in your day when you're feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, or frustrated. One of the first things that you tell yourself is that this thing that I'm dealing with is tough, or this is a moment of suffering, or whatever words actually feel natural to you. It's actually acknowledging what you're actually feeling. The idea is to hold with the moment of emotional pain, be with it, and accept that it's actually happening. Next, it's about acknowledging that you're actually not alone in your suffering. There are so many other people or teachers facing this same sense of overwhelm that I'm experiencing right now. And the idea here is to actually recognize that you're part of common humanity so that you feel less isolated in your pain and ultimately more connected to others. The third thing is to really offer yourself some kind of compassionate words and even a soothing gesture or touch, like placing your hand on your heart. As humans, we are wired to respond positively to calming voices and gentle touch. Again, use your own style here. You might say, may I be kind to myself today, or may I be especially gentle with myself today. Another option is to deepen practice of self-compassion, is to actually write a self-compassionate letter. But before you write the letter, I want you to ask yourself, what sort of challenges are you facing right now, personal or professional? Consider how you speak to yourself when under stress, and how do you actually comfort and soothe yourself? Then, once you've done that, I want you to then take the following steps. Identify something about you that makes you feel uncomfortable, insecure, or perhaps not good enough. I want you to write it down and describe how it actually feels. And then I want you to write a letter to yourself expressing compassion, understanding, and acceptance for the part of yourself that you dislike. When you write that letter, I want you to consider, what would a person who loves and accepts you unconditionally say to you about this part of yourself? Remind yourself that everyone has things about themselves that they don't like, and that no one is without flaws. Think about how many other people in the world are struggling with the same thing that you're struggling with. In a compassionate way, ask yourself whether there are things that you could do to improve or perhaps better cope. Focus on how constructive changes could make you feel happier, healthier, or more fulfilled, and avoid judging yourself. After writing the letter, put it down for a little while, then come back to it later and read it again. Number 5 are mind-body practices. So we know social distancing, self-isolation, and panic buying has really created havoc on people's mental health and well-being. So amongst the genuine danger of coronavirus, the human fear response is now in overdrive for many people. So what I really wanted to share is that what often happens when we're in those particular states is that self-care is probably one of the first things that tends to go when people experience tough times. But what I can share that if you want to lead and help others through these times of struggles, you really need to put on your own oxygen mask first. And here are 4 specific tactics that you can actually implement. So the first one is to reflect on one thing that you're too hard on yourself about, and then forgive yourself. Second thing is to think of one small thing that people could do to support you this week and ask for it. The third thing is to write down what you appreciate about 3 people you love and send it to them. And then the fourth thing is schedule a worry hour. So block off a slot or a time in your calendar where you can get to be as worried as you want for that amount of time. So that last one is actually quite impactful. So when you schedule time away to actually worry, that means you're able to be more present for the rest of your day rather than feeling constantly overwhelmed by tides of anxiety, which tend to ripple out and impact how you interact with others. So when you find yourself getting worried, perhaps tossing and turning in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, gently say to yourself, that's not my problem right now, that's a 6 p.m. problem, I'll worry about it then. Disconnecting from your day-to-day routine can support you to combat the effects of stress and really nurture your emotional well-being. Implement regular scheduled breaks every hour is important. Investing time in rehydrating, going into nature perhaps, breathing in fresh air, immersing yourself in a little vitamin D where possible can really make a difference. Build in your day some form of movement, whether it be a 20-minute walk, doing some yoga poses, or perhaps, attending some kind of gym or doing some kettlebell moves. Physical and emotional well-being really depends on the quality of your sleep. So engage in something that you are actually passionate about, and that will actually help you restore and disconnect from your day-to-day routine. Identify how to tap into an interest or a hobby. Occupy your mind with a free, perhaps online course to learn a new skill, explore some cooking classes, or listen to an audio book. Another strategy is to actually engage in automatic writing, so where you free write whatever comes to the surface for you. When you actually can express your emotions, thoughts and feelings in an uncensored way, it really invites an opportunity to release the emotions. You can write them in a journal, on a piece of paper, and then as part of a letting go process, you can actually burn them. All human beings must have time to recharge. So meditation for 5 minutes can really have a huge difference in terms of reducing stress, enhancing brain functioning, and strengthening immunity. One good app is Headspace. They actually offer a 10-minute guided meditation that can assist you to recharge and be more focused and productive. Another thing that's really important is to really be able to connect with what we call your inner net. So listening to your body for 15 minutes a day can really assist you to recognize and name your emotions. So what do I mean? By creating a space where you can actually sit quietly with a journal, I want you to close your eyes, and when images, words or body sensations occur, just record them. Stay with the feeling and inquire more deeply and explore the quality. Is it anger? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling sadness? Or are you feeling peace and calm? I then want you to return your attention to your body and allow the sensation to release. By being present to your inner world is often enough to be an emotional release. So when you connect to areas of discomfort within the body, you can actually decrease the symptoms of stress and improve psychological well-being. Mindfulness is also very important and another strategy that you can utilize to unplug. So mindfulness is really taking time out right now to simply be with your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations without being resistant to them. So there's no judgment. I can be aware, for instance, of my mental chatter and intense emotions, and I can also practice openness and curiosity as I observe my ever-changing internal world. So sometimes what I may do is I may actually close my door for 5 minutes, turn off the lights and lie down on my back, calming my overstimulated mind and body. So when you get caught up in the needs and lives and stories of whether it's your students, whether it's your clients, I know that the best thing that I can actually do for myself is to actually just stop, hit the pause button and just be for a moment before re-engaging with other people. Over time, mindfulness for me is more of a way of being as I learn to infuse lots of mini practices into my days. So it's not just when I wake up or before I go to sleep. I've also included in here a mindful exercise where you can actually ground yourself, gather your energy and attention to feel more centered in the present when in a stressful moment. So what you can do is just simply stand. You find the center of gravity in your abdomen 2 inches below your navel and focus on this point by feeling your feet solidly on the ground. Focus attention on this point is actually used in martial arts to gather and generate vital energy. So spend a few minutes focusing on this point and feeling gravity connecting your body to the earth. Another option is conscious breathing or mindful breathing. It's to cultivate really a deeper awareness of your experiences. So when you breathe mindfully, you literally pause to breathe, focus on your breath and be present to that moment. When you deliberately choose to focus on your breath, you create a better concentration and attention and have less chatter happening. So check your posture, close your eyes, attend to your breath naturally, place a slight smile on your face and observe without judgment. You can focus on a phrase, you can focus on an image, or you can just focus on your breath. Within the handouts, I've also included for you 5 digital ways that can actually support and nurture your social and emotional well-being. These 5 apps, well actually 4 apps and a link to a website, really teach you how to meditate, breathe, live mindfully, reduce stress, overcome negative thoughts, build greater resilience and improve emotional well-being. Have a look at them and adopt. We'll try one out, see what works for you, and try on some of the practices. They're really worth exploring. So as we come towards the end of the presentation, I really want you to make a commitment to you. So I want you to think about the strategies I've shared and which ones resonate with you. Is it the conscious breathing? Is it implementing boundaries? Is it building habits? Is it leading self-care? Is it cultivating gratitude? Implementing self-compassion, a self-compassion break perhaps, or writing a self-compassionate letter. It's really important for you to commit to one that you're willing to try on today and share your experiences with your colleagues. Whichever approach you choose, start small. You don't need to spend a lot of time, perhaps 5-10 minutes initially each day just to begin. Although we face a time of great uncertainty and a challenging mixture of emotions, give yourself and others permission to feel all emotions. You can draw on multiple tools to help you pause, be with those emotions and redirect them. If you practice taking healthy timeouts on your own, you're more likely to model and share these rituals with your students, your colleagues and family members. Let's commit to practicing self-care each day so that you can move forward together with a greater sense of ease, purpose and kindness. So I want to say a massive thank you for allowing me to share some of my knowledge and experience with you. Please feel free to reach out and connect with me through social media or my website. I look forward to hearing from you and to share which strategy you actually implemented and how that's really made a difference for you. So please stay safe and healthy and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Excelente, Angela Camboris, espectacular. Creo que ha sido ese momento cuando uno se pone más que intenso en el momento de estar frente a una conferencia, estar observando cada paso, cada momento que se vive, y eso da las claras de lo importante que es este congreso. Realmente creo que los docentes deben estar más que agraciados.
Obviamente, por supuesto. Si los docentes tienen alguna duda y quieren contactarse con ella, pueden hacerlo a través de su página web evolucion.com y ella va a estar contestándoles todas las dudas y las preguntas que tengan para hacerle.
Exactamente, y llegó el momento de charlar con ellos, con los referentes. Está el profesor Sebastián Silva y también la profesora Cira Acosta. Bienvenidos. Ellos son referentes de lenguas extranjeras, referentes de esta área, de la Dirección de Asistencia Técnica Pedagógica. ¿Cómo están? Bueno, profe, usted ya...
Muy bien.
Excelente, brillante. Cira, ¿cómo está usted?
Todo bien, muy bien.
Un placer, ¿no? Acérquese el micrófono para que la vamos a escuchar.
Muchas gracias
mejor.
por invitarnos y por engalanar nuestro bloque con tan amable presentación y bueno, que nos dediquen un bloque exclusivo para los profesores de inglés. Para nosotros es muy importante, agradecidos de este espacio y bueno, que sea productivo y muy exitoso para todos.
Muchísimas gracias por estar. Bueno, nos cuentan cómo es el trabajo de ustedes en equipo dentro de la Dirección de Asistencia Técnico-Pedagógica.
¿Cómo no? ¿Cómo no? Bueno, nosotros estamos en la Coordinación de Lenguas Extranjeras, dependemos de la Dirección de Asistencia Técnico-Pedagógica, bajo la dirección del doctor José Luis González, que siempre está acompañándonos en todas las iniciativas en relación a las lenguas extranjeras. Y sí, así como decimos, somos una coordinación de lenguas extranjeras. Entonces no solamente trabajamos con inglés, que es el idioma obligatorio desde el 4º año de la escuela primaria, sino que también trabajamos con profesores y las instituciones donde se enseñan otros 7 idiomas. Podemos mencionar el francés, el alemán, el portugués, el italiano, el hebreo, el árabe y el coreano. O sea, son 8 idiomas en los que nosotros vamos acompañando a los colegas y tratando de hacer un monitoreo, haciendo una evaluación de la implementación de estos idiomas.
Bien, y ahora, ¿cómo trabajan en ese caso, profesor? ¿Usted quería sumar algo más?
Sí, bueno, como decía el profesor Sebastián, la coordinación ya lleva un camino andado y a través de los años hemos trabajado no solamente con docentes y con alumnos, sino también con directores, supervisores, a quienes, bueno, también siempre agradecemos la predisposición para trabajar con nosotros. Estamos atentos a todas las necesidades o emergentes que tengan que ver con nuestra área y básicamente hacemos un acompañamiento, asesoramiento, colaboramos en cualquier problemática que pueda llegar a surgir o que podamos nosotros detectar desde nuestro equipo. Y bueno, siempre trabajamos con mucho entusiasmo, con mucho ahínco, porque queremos jerarquizar a las lenguas extranjeras, darles el lugar que se merecen en el Ministerio de Educación y también, bueno, aprovechando que en esta gestión también se nos da mucho espacio, mucho lugar, especialmente, bueno, se ve muy reflejado en este cuarto Congreso Internacional, que ya desde el año pasado tenemos una sede exclusiva para las lenguas extranjeras. Eso da una muestra muy cabal de que estamos haciendo un trabajo arduo, con mucho esfuerzo, con mucho sacrificio, pero que tenemos la visión de que todo va a ser cada vez más productivo y vamos a ir creciendo año a año como se merecen las lenguas extranjeras y el lugar que tienen que ocupar en nuestro ministerio.
Y además ustedes no se imaginan lo contentos que están los profesores de las lenguas extranjeras, especialmente los de inglés, porque bueno, desde el año pasado, como decía Cira, contamos con esta sede y con disertantes, con instituciones, con organizaciones que nos apoyan permanentemente, como el Trinity College de Londres, que el año pasado estuvo en nuestra sede. En este año también quisieron trabajar. Vamos armando los vínculos con estas instituciones, organismos como la Embajada, que nos permiten también, ¿no es cierto?, acercarnos a los docentes con nuevas propuestas. Para mencionarles algunas, el año pasado, en el mes de septiembre, junto con la Embajada de Estados Unidos, hicimos una capacitación para los docentes donde tratábamos de abarcar el conocimiento, la adquisición de la lengua extranjera y también las emociones. Por eso diseñamos una capacitación que se denominó Brain and Heart in the ELT Classroom. Entonces, donde vinieron especialistas americanos con otros especialistas de la zona. Y los docentes de inglés, la verdad que celebramos, festejamos que se presenten estas oportunidades. Y no sería posible sin el apoyo del señor ministro de Educación, el doctor Juan Pablo Lismayer, y toda la educación en general. Nosotros, como para acotarles, también trabajamos con todos los niveles de educación. Primaria, secundaria, con el nivel superior y con todas las modalidades. Y los directores de cada una de esas direcciones están permanentemente apoyando a las lenguas extranjeras.
Qué bueno, ¿no? Ahora, recién mencionaba también la profesora lo que es el impacto de estar conectado de todas estas lenguas. Hoy, un mundo que está netamente globalizado, y esperemos que pronto ya volvamos a viajar. ¿Esto cómo ayuda? Más, como dijo usted, profesor, desde cuarto grado ya tenerlo, o cuarto año, tenerlo ya así como materia fundamental y es un pilar importantísimo para el crecimiento, para la apertura, ¿no?
Claro.
Del mundo, hacer hombres y mujeres de mundo en la educación
Y
humana.
además no se trata solamente de aprender reglas gramaticales, claro, o vocabulario, sino que el aprender un idioma te hace ver la vida de una manera diferente, porque a través de los idiomas tenemos acceso a culturas, a observar tradiciones de otros países. Entonces, la verdad que abre un mundo extraordinario.
Podemos perder el miedo entonces a aprender inglés, sea cual sea la edad, ya sea chiquito, una persona grande, adulta que nos esté viendo y dice, no, pero ya estoy grande para aprender inglés. ¿Es difícil?
Y mira, yo creo que dicen por ahí que the younger the better. Cuando más jóvenes, mejor. Pero también es importante mencionar que un cerebro bilingüe o multilingüe tiene muchas ventajas, ¿sí? Por ejemplo, para tirarles algunos datos, se dice que un cerebro bilingüe retrasa la posibilidad de contraer una enfermedad mental, tal como el Alzheimer, en 5 años. O sea, imagínense, no importa la edad que tengan, empezar a estudiar una lengua extranjera tiene sus ventajas. No solamente porque podés comunicarte con otros, podés conocer otras culturas, sino que también el cerebro empieza a trabajar de una manera diferente.
Es como un ejercicio físico, ¿no?
Exacto.
Como hacer actividad física, pero para el cerebro.
Un cerebro joven, profe.
Nosotros estamos convencidos, ¿no?, de lo que decimos y de que aprender un idioma extranjero solo trae beneficios. El alto costo cognitivo que eso implica nos permite a nosotros como aprendientes, como estudiantes de una lengua extranjera, abrir nuestra cabeza, hacer una autorreflexión también de cómo aprendemos a aprender, y es constante esa reflexión, nos permite utilizar todo lo que aprendemos en cualquier ámbito de nuestra vida. Claro. Así que no termina solamente en aprender una lengua extranjera. Va más allá, y aparte también nos permite, como decía el profe Sebastián, no solamente conocer nuevas culturas, sino valorar a través de esas culturas la propia.
Exactamente, uno valora mucho más sus raíces, sus tradiciones. Se ha ampliado la cantidad de docentes, ahora hay muchos más docentes también de diferentes lenguas extranjeras. Recién el profesor mencionó algunas de las lenguas que tenemos acá dentro de la educación pública en la provincia de Tucumán, y de hablar también de las otras. Pero también hay una interacción permanente, y seguramente a partir de ahora muchos docentes van a querer estar en contacto con ustedes mucho más. Porque no también lo que son estudiantes, ¿no? Y dicen, queremos llegar a esa excelencia, queremos sumarnos a esta propuesta. ¿Cuáles son los mecanismos de contacto que están teniendo ahora con ellos?
Mira, con todo el trabajo que venimos haciendo a lo largo de todos estos años, estamos creando redes de comunicación con casi todos los docentes. Y tenemos desde una plataforma virtual donde compartimos con ellos información, material pedagógico que les pueda servir en sus clases. También, bueno, en los últimos tiempos y a partir de esta pandemia hemos podido comunicarnos de otra manera con los docentes a través de grupos de WhatsApp, ¿no?, donde nos permite inmediatamente conectarnos. Y quería contarles, ya que les mencionaba esta nueva manera de comunicarnos, esta pandemia nos ha permitido llegar a los docentes no solamente para saber cómo van trabajando, qué estrategias han utilizado para, bueno, enfrentar esta situación, sino también nos ha permitido saber qué es lo que sienten, ¿no?, cómo se han sentido, cómo se han descubierto, cómo han podido avanzar en este proceso de enseñanza-aprendizaje en esta nueva realidad, en esta nueva escuela. Pero, y volviendo a esta pregunta, nosotros tenemos un correo, una dirección de mail, que es lenguasextranjerassec de secundaria @gmail.com, que es la vía por la que se pueden contactar con nosotros también.
Seguramente muchos docentes ya estarán escribiéndoles para tener más información acerca, ¿no?, de lo que es esta coordinación específica de lenguas extranjeras.
Sí, y también, bueno, hacerles saber a los docentes que nosotros siempre estamos abiertos a cualquier inquietud que ellos tengan, propuestas, necesidades de intervención tal vez, y hemos implementado, como decía el profesor Sebastián, una serie de conversatorios con docentes de todo Tucumán y de todos los idiomas, porque nos interesaba también que ellos sepan que nosotros los estamos escuchando, que los queremos acompañar, que los asesoramos, no solamente en cuanto a material didáctico o propuestas que puedan elaborar para sus clases virtuales, sino también hacerlos sentir que no están solos, ¿no? Que a través de esos conversatorios recibíamos también estaban muy agradecidos los colegas, porque nos decían que se sentían acompañados por el colega y por el ministerio a la vez. Sentían que sus voces estaban siendo escuchadas y que a todos les estaba pasando más o menos lo mismo cuando, bueno, tuvieron que enfrentar esta situación de emergencia mundial, ¿no?
Lo entendemos. Profe, vamos a repetir el correo electrónico para que los docentes que están ahora ya mismo comiencen a postearlo, a tenerlo allí grabado para que escriban.
Lenguas extranjeras SEC, todo junto, SEC de secundaria, ahí se van a juntar dos S, lenguas extranjeras SEC, @gmail.com.
Perfecto, allí pueden escribir entonces y ya comenzar a interactuar con los docentes. Nos imaginamos qué contentos también estarán los alumnos teniendo esta plataforma enorme de docentes de lenguas extranjeras. Así que bueno, nada más que felicitarlos, agradecerles por ser parte de este congreso.
Sí, para cerrar también queríamos decir que la coordinación va a seguir trabajando. La vara es bastante alta. Nos hemos propuesto tenemos muchas perspectivas de trabajar y le ponemos mucho entusiasmo a lo que hacemos. Queremos que todos los docentes se vean beneficiados y también nuestros alumnos, que son nuestro horizonte siempre. Y bueno, que siempre nuestras líneas de acción no pasan por un solo lado. Estamos atentos a todos los posibles casos en los que nos podemos desarrollar, y queremos que sepan que el Ministerio está presente a través de la coordinación y bueno, que queremos seguir creciendo. Sabemos que hay mucho por mejorar, hay mucho siempre hay metas nuevas para cumplir y bueno, hacia ellas vamos.
Sí, y además, y acotar algo más, porque cuando pensamos en la coordinación de lenguas extranjeras, generalmente pensamos en que trabajamos solamente con los profesores. Sí. En realidad, nuestra tarea también está abocada a asesorar a directores, a supervisores. Ya desde el año pasado venimos sosteniendo una serie de reuniones con ellos como para orientarlos, ¿no es cierto?, en cómo acompañar a sus docentes en cada una de sus instituciones, desde cómo se adquiere una lengua, qué observar en una clase de la lengua extranjera. Claro. Así que también la invitación a que se comuniquen con nosotros, a los directores y a los supervisores.
Seguramente, ¿no? Seguramente ya se estarán comunicando y ojalá que esta vara siga creciendo para que sigamos progresando en todo lo que son las lenguas extranjeras. Cira, muchísimas gracias por estar acá, por acompañarnos en este cuarto Congreso de Educación una vez más. Sebastián, ¿cómo seguimos?
Bueno, vamos a seguir con la próxima presentación. Y la próxima presentación está sponsoreada por Trinity College de Londres y se trata de Angelo Boyas. While the demand of online teaching is getting higher, more and more teachers find themselves in situations of slow and problematic connections. This cannot but impact their ability to provide learners with synchronous learning opportunities. However, this does not have to be the case. There is a variety of digital tools, activities, and remote teaching approaches which allows us to provide learners with learning opportunities which do not require synchronous communication methods. The speaker of this presentation is Angelo Boyas. Angelo is a teacher trainer for Trinity College London and ELT consultant. He has been a regular speaker at international conferences. He has presented talks and webinars in more than 50 international conferences in different countries: Greece, Italy, Budapest, Glasgow, Ireland, Malta, France, Slovakia, and Poland. He has been invited to deliver webinars on topics such as technology and education, professional development, exam preparation, and teacher wellness, among others. He has delivered webinars for major companies, institutions, associations, and organizations. Among them, we can mention Trinity College London, ETAI Israel, Virtual Roundtable, EFL Talks. So, welcome to Angelo Boyas.
Hello, and welcome to today's presentation on remote offline teaching. Today, we will look at some ideas that we can use with learners whose connection or circumstances do not allow us to teach them online in a live, synchronous fashion. In an ideal scenario, we would like to use synchronous and asynchronous modes of delivery. We would like to have our live class where we meet our learners online in real time. This would be followed by some post-lesson homework or consolidation activities, some asynchronous group work tasks or self-access materials, and some, again, asynchronous preparation on the learner's part where they would prepare for the upcoming live synchronous session. So we have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning using a variety of tools and approaches. When it comes to synchronous learning, we're looking at using a video conferencing platform, what we call a virtual classroom, and perhaps a live chat, a messenger app that could function as plan B in case our virtual classroom collapses, our connection is not very strong, or technology fails. There are many video conferencing apps or websites that you can use with your learners. Here I just have 3 as an example. There are many more that you can explore, compare, and choose the one that best suits you and your learners. When it comes to asynchronous learning, we have emails, screencasts, and learning management systems as ways to communicate with our learners. In particular, I would like to focus on screencasting. Screencasting can be used for any teacher-led activity that you have in your lessons. If you want to present, for example, a particular grammar structure, if you want to focus on some vocabulary, if you want to teach your learners something, or to provide feedback on particular language items. Any teacher-led activity, any teacher-fronted stage of your lessons can be delivered asynchronously through a screencast. You simply record your screen, you can have your video there and also your voice. You prepare a short video presentation and you send it to your learners. This way, learners have access to your input in their own free time. And also, they have access to your input many times if you want to watch the same video again and again and again for revision purposes or to clarify something. Again, with screencasting, same as with video conferencing tools, there are many screencasting tools for teachers. Some of them are free, or some of them work on a freemium basis, where you have a free account gives you access to a set of benefits, and then if you want more time or more recordings, you need to get a new account, a premium account, for which you need to pay for. Screencasting is not the only option you have for asynchronous learning. Also, screencasting is a little bit teacher-fronted because usually it is the teacher presenting something, it's a teacher giving input. However, as part of the language learning process, it's important to give your learners activities, tasks to do inside and outside of the class, physical or virtual. So in today's presentation, I'm going to show you a number of tools, websites and applications that you can use with your learners in an asynchronous fashion. Learners on their own can access these tools to perform a task or an activity that you set. Therefore, if your learners do not have a very strong connection, or if they cannot attend your live online classes, they can still participate in interactive and engaging activities. Let's look at them. To those of you who are teaching younger learners, perhaps, you can create avatars for your learners, or you can create avatars with your learners. You can send them descriptions, perhaps, of people, and they can go to voki.com and they can create an avatar that resembles the description of the person that you sent them. This way, you test their listening skills and their vocabulary knowledge while they are creating something new, something that they might find, to be fun and engaging. They can also create their own avatar and deliver presentations through this avatar. Voki is a great tool not only for younger learners or teenagers, but also for adult learners as well. It creates a little bit of fun. It's something that learners can do on their own with minimal instructions from you, and they can be as creative as they want. Another very interesting website is jigsawplanet.com. And this one has many applications. I always like to use puzzles for maps, for instance, or to help younger learners with their creativity, but also to give directions and instructions. So in a live online classroom, you could have learners working in pairs, one of them giving instructions to the other as to what to do with the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. But you can also give this to learners as a means of engaging with something creative, and then perhaps get them to reflect on how easy or difficult the puzzle was, or to get them to describe the puzzle. So the learners can spend a little bit of time playing with this jigsaw puzzle, and then they can, on their phones, they can record a short presentation of what we can see. Then they can send this to you via email or through your learning management system. Again, this is another way where you help learners use the language in their own time while they're playing. It is indeed a little bit more suitable when it comes to teaching younger learners, even early years perhaps, if you have fewer jigsaw pieces. However, teenagers and adults also enjoy jigsaw puzzles. I very much like to encourage my learners to use English when they're offline, when they go out for a walk, for example, or when they're at home at the end of their days. Usually I ask them to keep an audio diary of sorts, where they record how their day has been, and then they listen to it. They can self-correct, they can notice the language they use, and then they can re-record if they want before they submit it to you. Or when they go outside, they can just get their phones out and perhaps record a short video where they describe what they see to you, or they show you something and then they explain orally what it means for them, or why they find it beautiful, or why they find it important, or worthy of talking to you about it. It is also a very nice way for the learners to get you to know a little bit about themselves, about their room, or about their neighborhood. They can either email you their presentation via email, or they can use Vocaroo, where it's a very, very simple website. They don't need to have an account. They simply press a button, they record their voice, and then the website prompts them to email the recording to the teacher. So they will need to have your email address to send it to you. Again, encouraging learners to use whatever it is that they have, a mobile phone, a tablet, or their laptop, and without any additional perhaps tool or app, to get them to talk about their day, their learning experience, or something that they want to share, is another very interesting way to get the learners to use the language. The most important part of the entire process, of course, is the fact that they can notice the language they use. So learners themselves become very active in their own language learning process. They can listen to the recording, and then they can focus on their pronunciation, on the vocabulary they used, on their grammar. You can perhaps tell them what you want them to focus on. Or if it's still very early in their language learning development, you can receive the recording, listen to it, and rather than correcting them, you can send it back to them and indicate what is the area that you want them to focus on. Learners then identify how they've done in this particular area, and then they can re-record the same thing and send it back to you improved. Another idea is to use breakingnewsenglish.com. This is one of my favorite websites. It is updated daily, and usually what happens is you see stories, current affairs written presented in different levels. So you have the same story accessible by learners of different levels. An advanced student will go to the advanced level and will read the story, obviously with more details. But also an elementary level learner can access the same story, but with fewer details, with graded language and appropriate content. Of course, this is very helpful for reading. However, breakingnewsenglish.com also offers a listening, an audio version of the stories in the form of videos most of the times. So you can get learners into the habit of listening to current affairs, things that possibly interest them, in English. You can then ask them to do a follow-up task, maybe to write a short summary of today's news and send it to you. If you're in an area where you are using WhatsApp, for example, to communicate with the learners, or any other messenger application, you can ask them to share a little note with you. They can, again, going back to the previous idea, record themselves, giving an oral summary of the current news, or they can reflect on the news. They can talk about how they feel about the news they heard. Again, that's another way for learners to engage with the target language in a meaningful fashion. Storytelling is another very powerful tool that as language teachers have, and we can use it with learners of all ages. They can use a website like the one I'm showing to you here, makebelievescomics.com. They can create their own storyboard, their own comic really, and this could be a very short-term project or a long-term project where learners, perhaps every week, every other week, they add to their story. You could, if you know that your learners perhaps are maybe in the same household, if you are teaching siblings, or in the same neighborhood, and they are during these times allowed to meet and work together, they can create a story collaboratively. They can, each one can be responsible for one character. They can talk about the development of the story. And of course, the powerful thing here is that learners do not have to use English in the preparation, in the brainstorming, or in the planning stage of the entire process. They can engage in their own language. They can use their own language to work with one another, but the final product will be in English. This is particularly important when learners experience times like the ones that we live in at the moment, where it is very, very important to focus not only on their language learning development, but also on their well-being, making sure that they collaborate, they have friends that they sort of are in contact with. If it's not possible to physically meet with one another, they can be in touch with one another digitally via an online platform. Again, if they cannot use a live sort of a video conferencing tool, they can use a messaging app. If you're teaching even younger learners, perhaps early years, then Toontastic is another great application. It's more 3D and more visually appealing to the young ones, and again, it encourages them to create stories, to create characters. This as a project is very rich from a language learning perspective. We're talking about vocabulary that describes the characters, their physical characteristics, their personality traits, also the story, the development of the plot, and so on, the setting. This is quite an important activity that we need to start working with. And this is also an activity that does not require live synchronous communication between the teacher and the students. the students can be sent a brief every week, and they can be responsible for creating their stories and sending or sharing their stories with their teacher. It would be important, if we're looking at early years, of course, learners, it is important that the teacher is in some sort of contact with the parents as well, because they will be the ones that will be helping the students at home. If you have slightly older learners, we're looking now at perhaps post-primary, you can use a website like animoto.com, which allows learners to animate their pictures, to create a video based on the photographs they've taken, the photographs they have on their phones or on their devices. What they do is they put together a number of photographs that they want to, then they choose a nice soundtrack, and they add some text that accompanies these photos, and then the software creates a short video with the photographs and the music and the text. Now again, this is another creative way where learners can perhaps, like in my example here, talk about their past habits in a creative, meaningful and engaging manner. Learners are using their time, and again, if we are talking about periods like the one we are experiencing at the moment, learners tend to have a lot of free time. So it might be a good idea to introduce them to something like this, which will keep them engaged, it will focus on their creativity, and also it will make them think about language. They will be thinking about past habits while they're choosing their photographs, then researching appropriate vocabulary, writing the text, proofreading the text, and then producing the video. And this might be a little bit more interesting for them compared to perhaps, a task that asks them to write a short essay about their past habits. Plot generator is another really good tool to use with your learners. It helps learners create a short story, but it really helps them get started. It's a very good website, a very good tool, especially if you have learners who might not feel very confident or comfortable with being creative. It prompts learners to think of a title, the scene, the setting, the characters, adjectives to describe the characters, vocabulary to describe the setting. You choose how you want the plot to develop, and then it automatically develops a story for them. This can be a very interesting start if you want to introduce storytelling, for example, and you see that your learners do not respond as much as you would wish. Learners can use a website like this one to prepare them, to make them think of what is involved in storytelling. Again, when at first when they use it and they input all the data and the website generates a story, most of the times the final result is quite fun to read. So they can then perhaps respond to that or write a similar story, or you can use it for a little bit of reading. The options really are infinite here. You can use it however you like. It is a very nice, a very useful website to use with perhaps older students as well. Those adults who might find creativity not being linked to language learning at all, they might need a little bit of a kickstart when it comes to storytelling, and this is a very good place to start with. Now, here I have Flipgrid at info.flipgrid.com. And this is a very versatile tool that perhaps you might need to discover on your own, discover all the different functions and uses of Flipgrid, because there are quite a few. Learners can record a video. It could be a video presentation, or they can just take their phone in the same fashion that they would take a selfie. They can take a selfie video sort of thing where they share their opinion about something. And you as a teacher or the school, you can also have your space, your class space, which is going to be a safe environment, not public, but only within the access of the class or the school, so the other learners might be able to watch each other's videos, and perhaps other teachers, depending on your settings. And rather than posting perhaps responses in text format, learners can post their responses using video. This is particularly interesting when you want your learners to focus on perhaps more abstract topics. Where learners now, if they are perhaps beyond intermediate or beyond pre-intermediate, and they start their language learning journey at the intermediate, upper intermediate levels, where they need to engage in more with more abstract topics, this might be a good start. Again, the beauty of this tool is that you don't have to be online at the same time as your learners. They can record themselves and upload it at their own time, and then the other learners can upload the responses at their own time, and you can monitor the process. You can perhaps focus on content, and then once you've exhausted the content of the learners' videos, you can focus on the language they've used. Then learners perhaps can re-record a video on the same topic using more advanced language, and they can also see their progress. They have a record right there in front of them of the before and after, if you like. And again, this is very powerful, very motivating for the learners to be able to track their own progress. It also, like previous tools we've seen so far, it also helps our learners to perhaps self-correct. They can see themselves, they can watch the video before they post it, they can take notes of their mistakes, they can go online and read more about those areas that they were incorrect with, and later on they can reshoot the video. Dictation.io is another tool that learners can use on their own. They don't need the teacher for that one. What it does is the following. Learners speak to their device through this software. It could be on their mobile phone, or it could be on their desktop. And the software transcribes what they say, creates a written record of what they say. Now, there are two reasons why this is important. The first one is learners can actually understand if their pronunciation is intelligible. It's not a matter of having this accent or that accent. It's a matter of, are you intelligible? Can we understand you? Granted, this is a device. This is a machine. It's not a human being, so it might not be perfect, but it will be a good start for learners to identify those words that they mispronounce, those words that need further attention. Also, this can be a good preparation for learners. If, for example, you're using something like Flipgrid that I showed you earlier, and learners are about to shoot a video, maybe they've written a transcript, maybe they've written their text of what they want to say. So before they go to record their video, They can use a software like dictation.io. They can read their script out loud, and then they can compare how the software transcribed what they said. They can see whether they've been accurate or whether there are parts of the script that they can perhaps revise. But also, it will give them a chance to deliver the speech, deliver the presentation, focus on pronunciation, and then go to Flipgrid and record it again. Another very similar tool is the Fluency Tutor. This is not only good for reading or literacy, but also for pronunciation. Learners can read aloud what they read. They can record themselves reading aloud, and the particular software will help them focus on their pronunciation, on how well they make those associations between the spelling and the pronunciation of a word or a phrase or even an entire text. I showed you earlier another website for listening to current affairs, and here I have another one. Perhaps this one might be more appropriate for teenagers, at upper secondary, or young adults. This listenwise.com is a website that has a variety of podcast-based lessons. So if your learners like listening to podcasts, you can use this website where learners can not only listen to a podcast, but they engage in activities. They need to perform tasks that are based on the podcasts they've listened to. The particular website also has quizzes to check learners' listening comprehension. So again, if you are in a situation where you cannot teach your learners live online, you can assign particular activities from this website. Your learners can perform the tasks, they can do the quizzes, and they can email you or text you their results. This way you can track their progress and you can intervene where you see fit. Vlogging is another very, very interesting way that learners have to develop their language skills. We've talked earlier about recording videos, uploading them on something like Flipgrid, which is protected, it's only for your classroom, engage in conversation with other learners, sort of have that sense of community, that learning community that we need, especially when we teach online. But vlogging is also very interesting, and it's also something that younger learners know and some of them use. They follow vloggers, and some of them might be vloggers themselves in their own language. So you can create a class vlog that you monitor, that you moderate. And every week or every month, depending on your learners and your schedule, you can have a theme, and learners can be responsible for updating the content of the vlog. If your learners are good with working together, you can also assign different roles. So one of them might be the presenter, the other one might be the person who writes the script, the other one the person that finds the visuals, somebody who does the editing, the proofreading. You can also make sure that those roles perhaps change every month, so everybody gets to have to try out a different position. Again, something like vlogging is important because it builds a sense of community. It encourages learners to collaborate with one another, but also to use the language in a creative and personalized manner. You don't need to be there live with the learners. You can send them assignments that they can do. You monitor. You might make corrections that you then send to them with a little bit of material to read, something like a collection of activities, a chapter from a book to read and focus on their language And that's another way that learners can track their own progress. I showed you earlier how learners with ListenWise can listen to podcasts and do activities based on them. Why not get your learners to have their own, to create a podcast of their own? It could be something very personalized where each learner has their own podcast, or it could be, again, a class thing, very similar to the vlog idea I showed you earlier. Learners can decide on the topic, the content, they can write it, they can script it, they can interview one another, they can interview members of their household, and also they can then listen to themselves participating in this podcast. They can focus on their pronunciation, their language, you can listen to it, and you can send your corrections. I chose to show you soundcloud.com as a website for learners to upload their podcasts on. And this is because SoundCloud allows you as an editor, you the teacher as an editor, to go and add comments at particular points during the recording. So this is very, very important for you when you give feedback on language, because you can listen to the podcast, and when you identify an error, or when you identify, a great structure that your learners used accurately and appropriately, you can go and choose that particular second and add your comment. When you send it back to your learners, the learners can listen to their podcast, and when the time comes and they listen to their phrase in focus, they can also read your comment at the same time. This helps them become more active listeners. This helps them notice the language that they use and notice what you're talking about. You can then ask them to re-record and re-upload the podcast. With the more advanced learners, you can also use TEDed. Ed from education, ed.ted.com is a great website where teachers can create asynchronous lessons for their learners. You can choose a video, a lecture, a presentation that you find appropriate for your learners, and you can create your own tasks. Learners then access the lesson you've created, and they complete the tasks on their own. As a teacher, you can track their progress, you can see their score, and you can then recommend a course of action based on their responses. This is a really, really easy website for teachers to use. It is free, and it uses the video or the transcript, if you want, of very good quality presentations. For lower secondary plus students, textadventures.co.uk is another very, very good website to use, where learners interact with one another, not necessarily with your class, but also with others around the world. Here, your learners can create adventure stories. They can write them, they can post them, they can work collaboratively with someone else. And again, you can track their progress. You can see what they do, you can help them out, you can set a particular task, a particular theme perhaps, and you can have all your class collaborate with one another. EasyPrompter.com is a website. I use this with my learners when we are in a physical classroom to help them improve the reading pace. I've used it with my online lessons when we are in a synchronous mode of delivery. But also, I find it's a very, very useful tool to use at home for your learners to practice their reading pace the reading speed. So learners copy and paste a text that you've selected or a text that they want to read. They copy and paste it onto the software, and then the software starts, it scrolls automatically the text at a given speed. So they don't see all the text at once on their screens, they just see line by line by line. Learners can choose the speed of the prompter, and they can start from a very slow speed and gradually go faster. Again, this is a nice tool where learners can take they can take initiative. They can be in charge of their own learning and of their own progress as well. For those of you teaching early years or primary, you can use mystorybook.com. I've used this with adult learners and they really like it as well. What happens is it's a very easy website for your learners to create a storybook. They can create a story about their pet or their family or something in their immediate environment. It's a very, very easy website to use. They can use it on their tablets if they have, or their laptops, and it helps, the website helps the students. It guides them step by step on preparing their storybook. They choose their background, they can draw, they can add items, and they can also add speech bubbles. So perhaps at the very beginning, an idea is to give them the story. And their task is to animate the story, so they have to work a little bit with the content and their comprehension and understand what the story is all about. And progressively you can give them control, you can give them the basic plot, and they can write a little text, some speech bubbles, or they can write their own story. As a teacher, you can create your own account and you can have your learners linked to your account so you can track their progress as well. Newsella.com is another website that can help learners with their reading in an asynchronous fashion. They can choose any story they like, and if they're interested in a topic, they can read it. They can choose the topic, they can choose the level as well. And if they are registered users still on the free account, you can create interactive quizzes for them, or they can choose from available interactive quizzes and open questions. As a teacher, you can track and monitor their progress, send them feedback or some remedial or some material for remedial work afterwards. It is a very easy tool to use. It's a very easy website, and again, learners decide what they want to read if you allow them to do so, and they can practice their reading skills autonomously. While they practice reading, it is important, of course, to give them the tools to access texts of a higher, perhaps, of higher levels, of more advanced texts. They can use a website like readlang.com, where learners can actually translate on the spot. Readlang is like a plugin that you can create. You can add to your browser. Learners read the text. Maybe you've assigned them something on one of the websites I showed you earlier, or any other website, and learners just click on a word and they get the translation. Now, this is very important because it helps learners read the text you've assigned them to read. But also importantly, learners, the software creates a vocabulary list based on the words that the learners didn't know. So automatically the website stores these lexical items, and it creates flashcards which learners can use for revision on their own again. Another tool that learners might want to use especially if you want to encourage them to read more difficult texts, but they find that the density of the text does not make it accessible to them, is something like Rewardify. Rewardify allows learners to copy and paste a piece of text into this website, and then it creates an easier version of the text. There is a number of ways that you can use rewardify.com in class and make it more productive. For example, learners can identify those lexical items or chunks that they couldn't understand. They have the easier synonyms, and this will help them perhaps with their learning progress. You can ask them to create a written record, so something like a vocabulary notebook with that. Or just give this tool to them that will make online reading a little bit more accessible to them. If you want them to start focusing on summaries, a first step that they can do on their own is, again, they read a text, they copy and paste it onto this website, textcompactor.com, and then the website will create a summary of the text. Learners can then read the summary and prepare a short evaluation of the effectiveness of this summary. Then, if they find that the summary is not great, they can rewrite, they can improve the given summary. This makes it easier for learners to engage in summary writing, especially at the beginning, rather than just ask them to write a summary. So it's a very good first step for learners to read a text, read a summary, evaluate, and then correct it, make it better, improve it, and then perhaps send it to you to check. If you have learners who enjoy writing, you can visit a website like writetheworld.com, where learners learners become part of a global community of writers, and they can take part in writing competitions. You can have an account as an educator, and you can link your learners' accounts to your account, so again you can track their progress, and learners can create online journals, they can blog, if they don't want to participate in competitions, and other learners from other parts of the world, they can also read your learners' work and add a comment, make a suggestion. And it's really nice if you have learners who like writing, because writing is one of those things that they can do on their own. They can do as much research as they like, draft, redraft, focus on language, perhaps send you a draft, you can send them feedback, and they can upload the final version on this website. The competitive element with some learners is very, very motivating, so you might want to try this out. Scribble is another tool that you can use where learners save the texts they like. So they install a plugin, and then when they read something they like, they can start annotate the text. They can make comments, and what happens is that the text and the annotation is saved in your learner's online library, which can then be shared with a teacher. So this is good if you want your learners to become autonomous readers, if you've given them access to a website like any of the ones that I showed you earlier that has a plethora of reading texts, and they can perhaps create a library of their reading and their reflections. Now, for something a little bit more advanced, you can use lingro.com. This one helps learners create a personalized corpus. Learners read a text. If they like it, they can perhaps get the URL of the text and paste it here on lingro.com. Then the text becomes clickable. it becomes interactive. And if the learners do not know some words, they click on the words, the words become, they get the translation, they choose the language that they want these words to be translated into, and again, the website saves these words, and so the learners at the end of the day have a vocabulary list for revision. Again, this is an opportunity for learners to take control of their own learning, focus not only on their reading, but also on their vocabulary. For those learners who want to focus on writing, and a website like the HemingwayUp.com is a nice way to help them proofread perhaps their writing, to help them focus on how they write, a little bit of, focusing on the structures such as the passive voice or adverbials or long sentences. This is an opportunity for learners to draft and redraft without your help. They can write an essay, upload it there, get some ideas about how to improve it, work on it, and then send it to you for feedback. If they don't want to send it to you for feedback, they can upload their work on a website like peergrade.io. This is a website that allows learners to submit their work, and they can review each other's work. This is particularly useful when you don't have a live online class. You set up a task, learners perform the task, and then they can read each other's work and make suggestions or give each other sort of positive feedback. Again, this is another opportunity for learners to develop that sense of learning community. If they want, they can engage if they want to engage in writing even more, they can find a pen pal. And they can do this through a website such as penpalschools.com, where you can be on that website if you want as a teacher to monitor what's happening. The parent has access to it as well, and then the student is there, and the website sort of links students of similar ages and similar levels of proficiency, of competency, and they can become pen pals. It's a very nice idea if you're teaching younger learners, because the parents are also involved. Again, if you are working with learners who enjoy writing, and especially those who enjoy writing short stories, they can use a website like storywars.net to create stories collaboratively. There, not only your group of learners, but also other learners can work with your learners, and they can create stories. They can, perhaps your learner creates the first episode of a story, and then someone else comes and adds a comment about how they would like the story to continue, or they can continue the story, and so on and so forth. Finally, I want to just perhaps recommend this website, but also other websites that you can find online these days, such as fluencyfirstelt.blog, that has so many ideas for synchronous and asynchronous language learning. You can use task-based, project-based activities that will keep your learners engaged and interested in using the language in a creative and meaningful fashion. And also it will facilitate a situation whereby you cannot meet your learners live. You can monitor their progress. They can send you, text you how much they've progressed. You can send them feedback and make this a long-term project where learners are using the language and are improving on their language use while they're participating in this project. Thank you very much for attending this presentation. I hope you found some of the ideas interesting. The idea here, and that's something to really highlight, is that you cannot and you should not go and start using all these tools. I know that teaching online, especially if you have to find offline activities, things that learners will do on their own, this is very time consuming. So choose one or two of these resources that I just showed you. Choose the ones that you feel you can use with your learners immediately. Start using them. Check how you can use them. Explore them online. Ask your learners to give you feedback on how effective these resources are for them, on how much they like using these resources, and monitor them over time and see how much and if at all they progress. If you think that they are doing a good job, keep on using them. If you think you need to change, try another one, but please do not start with all of them at the same time, because it will be a lot of work. Best of luck, and thank you very much.
Excelente conferencia a cargo de Angelo Boglias. Para todos ustedes que están ahí del otro lado y quieren comunicarse con él, pueden hacerlo a través de su página web www.angeloboglias.com. Él va a estar atento y contestándoles todas sus dudas. ¿Sabes qué, Marce?
¿Qué? Tenemos algo más ahora.
Estoy estresada.
Porque no. Bueno, vas a tener que hacer yoga entonces, porque eso es lo necesario para el equilibrio en general. Eliminamos el estrés. Sirve para estar equilibrado en todo el cuerpo.
Y
es bueno para el
¿no?
aparato cardiovascular.
Estimula a hacer otras cosas después. Una vez que haces una clase de yoga, aunque sean técnicas básicas,
sí,
podemos después seguir adelante con nuestra rutina diaria.
Por ejemplo, después de toda una jornada, de las 2 jornadas que tuvimos ya en este 5º módulo, culminando ya nuestro congreso, la gente puede hacer estas técnicas que son técnicas básicas de yoga y que son muy importantes para el aula. Hoy los chicos vemos que en la casa también lo practican con sus padres y muchos alumnos han llevado estas técnicas a sus hogares.
Y por supuesto el Ministerio de Educación no se queda atrás y a través de la plataforma Conectate con la Escuela nos ha regalado y nos va a regalar para todos este video.
Lo vemos.
Hola, te hablo a vos que estás en tu casa. Voy a transmitirte a través de estos micros de yoga para principiantes herramientas que te van a ser útiles en estos días, para vos y tu familia. Les cuento que yoga es una disciplina muy distinta a todas las que hicieron antes. Esta es una disciplina de autoconocimiento y de aceptación, a diferencia de las otras que son de superación. Vamos a unir el cuerpo y la mente a través de la respiración, tratando de mantenernos presentes. Ese va a ser nuestro objetivo por ahora. Vamos a tratar de colocar al cuerpo siempre en eje, encuadrado y alineando siempre las articulaciones, principalmente cintura escapular, cintura pélvica, las rodillas, los tobillos, y manteniendo siempre la mirada a la altura de los ojos. Vamos a comenzar estirando la columna y haciendo torsiones de columna. Eso va a hacer que nuestro eje principal, que es la columna, se mantenga en buen estado en estos días en donde nuestra movilidad va a estar reducida. Entonces, comienzo inhalando y llevando los brazos por delante, hacia arriba, sin elevar los hombros, solamente elevo los brazos. Y al exhalar, bajo. Otra vez, cuando inhalo, elevo los brazos. Y lo mismo que dura la respiración, dura el movimiento. Ahí es donde empezamos a trabajar esa unión entre el cuerpo y la mente a través de la respiración. En la próxima exhalación vamos a inclinar el torso hacia adelante, dejando que la cabeza cuelgue, tomándonos de los codos, relajando la nuca y los hombros. Cuanto más relaje los hombros, cuanto más relaje la nuca, las vértebras, más se van a ir estirando, porque tenemos un punto fijo en la cadera y el peso de la cabeza va a hacer que cada vértebra vaya generando más espacio una de otra. Una vez que terminamos apoyando las manos sobre las rodillas, inhalando, volvemos a colocar al cuerpo en eje. Vamos a hacer torsiones ahora. Primero estiramos la columna, ahora la vamos a torcer. Cuando inhalamos y llevamos los brazos hacia arriba, al exhalar vamos a torcer hacia el lado izquierdo. La mano derecha la vamos a colocar sobre el muslo izquierdo y la mano izquierda atrás a la altura del sacro, más o menos. El sacro es el hueso que está arriba del coxis, del huesito dulce. Es un hueso grande en el centro de la cola. La mirada la vamos a mantener a la altura de los ojos y vamos a mantener alto el esternón. Vamos a hacer de cuenta que con la cabeza estamos queriendo llegar al techo y de esa manera estiramos toda la columna. Vamos a inhalar y vamos a exhalar profundo, 5 veces. Y en una exhalación volvemos nuevamente al centro. Al inhalar llevamos los brazos hacia arriba y al exhalar torcemos hacia el otro lado. Volvemos a tener en cuenta lo mismo, que es mantener la mirada siempre a la altura de los ojos. Eso va a ayudar a que la columna esté en eje, firme el abdomen, la faja abdominal, la mano izquierda sobre el muslo derecho y la mano derecha atrás, ayudándome a traccionar para sostener la postura. Inhalo y exhalo profundo 5 veces. Y en una exhalación vuelvo nuevamente con los brazos al centro. Ahí hicimos 2 movimientos distintos de columna. Y ahora vamos a ir a la cadera. Flexiona la pierna derecha y la cruza, colocando el talón sobre la rodilla izquierda. Primero vamos a hacer movimientos suaves, bajando la rodilla para que la articulación de la cadera gane movilidad. Se mueva de a poquito. Una vez que hemos movido, inhalando otra vez llevamos los brazos hacia adelante, teniendo en cuenta de que los hombros no se acerquen a las orejas, o sea, esto no ocurre ahí. Y cuando exhalo, inclino el torso hacia adelante, relajando nuevamente los brazos y la nuca, permitiendo ahora que el peso de la cabeza y el peso de los brazos accionen en el pliegue de la cadera. Vamos a respirar 5 veces y en una exhalación y apoyando las manos sobre la rodilla y sobre el pie, nos ayudamos con la fuerza de los brazos para volver a colocar al cuerpo en eje. Cambiamos y vamos a hacer exactamente lo mismo con la otra pierna. De esa manera vamos a ir ganando movilidad en la articulación de la cadera y en la columna. Eso nos va a servir para estos días. Lo pueden hacer solo o lo pueden hacer con su familia. Esto es para cualquiera. Yoga siempre se puede hacer.
And now we have the last but not the least presentation. It is sponsored by the US Embassy. The title of the presentation is The Reality of Transforming Traditional Teaching Materials to Online. Teaching English online requires 2 extremely different jobs. In today's talk, an experienced language teacher and learner will present some practical consideration for all teachers as we try to teach English online. Yes, we can try to recreate what we used to do in a face-to-face classroom, but another approach is to consider the new opportunities as well as in the practical limitations of materials for learning English. Let me introduce Dr. Keith Falls. Dr. Keith Falls, professor of TESOL, University of Central Florida, teaches graduate, undergraduate, and doctoral courses. Originally secondary certified in English and French, he has taught English as a second language and teacher training courses for 40 years in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Kuwait, Japan, and the United States. For the last 11 years, he also taught online courses both synchronously and asynchronously. Dr. Falls' main research area is vocabulary, learning, and teaching in a second language. Dr. Falls is the author of 70 English and teacher educational textbooks and is a frequent conference presenter all around the world. His presentation often deal with best teaching practices, vocabulary, grammar, and speaking. He has won numerous teaching and research awards from the University TESOL International Association and National Geographic Learning. Let's welcome Dr. Keith Falls.
Hello everyone from Orlando, Florida in the United States. I am a professor here at the University of Central Florida, and I'm going to talk today about teaching English online. Specifically, I'm going to talk about what teachers would do if they want to use different kinds of activities that they have been used to using for a long time. So the title for today is The Reality, not just the nice things or the bad things, but the reality of transforming traditional teaching materials to an online setting. Again, my name is Keith Falls at the University of Central Florida. So before we start today, I'd like to thank the U.S. Embassy in Argentina, and especially Noris Cerda, whom I've known for many years and has been so instrumental in Argentina TESOL, our TESOL, so much, and helping teachers all over Argentina with the backing of the U.S. Embassy learn about English teaching activities. So today's talk is going to look at the good things and the bad things about teaching online, with specific reference to teaching English online. So I'm going to look at practical considerations as we try to teach English online, but also when you put your class together, and most English teachers, most language teachers, when they think of how to plan a class, we think about the activities we're going to do in class. And once we think about these activities, well, teaching online, you have two options in theory. You can try to recreate what you've always done in the past. For example, I always had people do pair work. How do I do pair work in an online setting? Or you can look at the technology we have in front of us, because we're teaching in a very new kind of classroom. It's not just we're moving to online, we're doing something brand new here. So the question for you and for me is, are we going to try to focus on what we've done in the past, and that's all we're going to do? How do I do this? How do I call the roll? How do I check attendance, etc.? Or are we going to start with the technology? And I'm going to suggest a combination of those two things. So I want to say that by way of background, for those who've taught for a long time, as I have, I've taught for 40 years. That's a long time. So I've seen different machines come and go. I remember when videos were going to change the way we teach English. So there's always a different kind of technology that is whatever is current at that time. And sometimes we get too carried away, we get too wowed by the technology. So let's just forget the technology for a moment and think about basic teaching principles and how will we adapt this to our new setting. Now, I have taught online for a long time. I think it's a long time. I've taught with Canvas. Canvas is a learning management system. I've taught for at least 8 years, maybe longer. And with Zoom this past semester, I can say. Most of us have about 6 months or so of experience using Zoom. I'll explain what those two things are in a moment. Today I'm going to organize the talk around 10 practical ideas for teaching online. So first, let's look at what some of these traditional teaching activities or materials might be. And I've just made a list of 5 here. I could have made a list of 50, but I'm going to go with these 5. So if I'm a teacher, I probably want to explain something to my students. I want to explain a grammar point. I want to explain vocabulary. I want to teach pronunciation. Basically, it's the teacher teaching. All right. Then speaking activities. Now, I'm not sure how many people we have in the audience today, but if we have 100 teachers, they're not all teaching in the same situation. So if you're teaching English in a high school where your students have English class twice a week, that's very different than somebody who goes to a private company for English classes or a university class that might meet once a week. So you're going to have different scenarios. I'm trying to speak as generally as I can today because I know that we have so many different kinds of teachers teaching different kinds of students in very different kinds of settings. Some of you have access to more technology than others, and that makes a difference for sure. So speaking activities, fill in the blank activities, what we used to call a worksheet. So for example, John blank here, and you write the word is. Or Maria and John am, is, are at the bank, where it's in parentheses and you underline the word are because it's a plural subject. Just a general worksheet. And then maybe it's a reading passage. What did we used to do 2 years ago, or even just 6 months ago? We used to tell students, let's read this together, these 3 paragraphs, and now let's answer the questions together. But that's when we were all physically together in one classroom, and we're not going to be physically together in one classroom, but we can be virtually together in a classroom. Now, most people, and I mean almost everybody listening today, has very, very little experience doing this. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Not some theoretical, gee, wouldn't it be nice? No, I want to talk about practical issues you might have. And I'm going to use my own experience. So let me just say, first of all, this is a very important point. You have, if you're going to teach online, you now have two very different jobs. And I hope your administration at your school really appreciates how difficult this is. I write textbooks. So I've taught for 40 years, but I've written 76 textbooks now. Do you know how much work it is to write a textbook? Now, you might say, well, I have to teach from the textbook. That's your job. Well, if you're going to be designing activities to go online, and so far I have not seen a single English course where everything was ready to go online. Teachers need to develop some things. Sometimes it's a lot of things, sometimes just a few things. Mostly it's a lot of things because this is new. Publishers are trying to come up with different things to help us all, but they're still new at this as well, okay? So if writing a book, and in essence, you're being asked to write a book. If we ask you to design activities for a 10-week course, that's the same as writing a book. And we then ask you to teach the class. So here are your two jobs. And you see that word time with the 3 question marks? That's the issue. How much time do you have to do this? So these are two very difficult jobs, very different jobs. That's the crucial thing. Just because you're a good teacher doesn't mean that you will be a good textbook writer. And just because you're very good at writing grammar worksheets doesn't mean you're going to be a good teacher. These are sometimes, luckily, it matches, but sometimes it doesn't. So building a course, also known as writing a course. So there's design issues. Are you going to have modules? Are you going to have it by weeks? And then all these different activities. What kind of activities will you have? Is it an activity with the student by himself or herself, where I'm just filling in something online, I'm A, B, or am I speaking to somebody else? And if I'm speaking to somebody else, is it live? Is it being recorded? Designing all of that is a lot of work. On top of that, when you have a course, I always laugh when I see someone that looks at one of my classes, I'll show you in a moment, and they'll say, oh, this is nice. No, it's not nice. There are hundreds of pages, activities, quizzes, even just I go to the internet to find an Argentinian flag, taking that flag and putting it in the right place on the right page and creating that page, that takes work. There are hundreds and hundreds of pieces in any online course. Please remember this, anytime a publisher gives you something online and you see one beautiful page, that is not one photo that's on that page. Somebody has put together a lot of pieces to make that happen. Now, guess what? You might be doing this kind of work, but there are pages. Now, when I say pages, I'll explain in a moment, I'll show you my own course. Then there are quizzes. This is just one example, writing a small quiz online. And there are discussions. How do you do a discussion online? So that's just designing the course. Separate from that is a job known as teaching the class. So in the old days, also known as 6 months ago, right, 2019, we used to just do the right-hand side, the teaching a class, where I would teach and I was a lecturer, I would explain something, we did activities. You see the ACT in capital letters, ACT, because people in an English class or a language class need to be actively doing things, in my opinion. And then we create these tasks. For example, turn to your partner and ask them blah, blah, blah. That's a task, right? Grading. So sometimes, well, here's a benefit. Now, I know everybody thinks going online is a negative, but one of the positives of going online is that many of these quizzes and smaller things like that can be graded automatically. And that is very important because time. You don't have time to create these, teach these, and then grade. You can't have 3 jobs. 2 jobs is the limit here, okay? There are discussions. Discussions are very time consuming online because you have to type everything out. Or do you? All right? And then writing. You know, looking at a writing class, it's not so different online. 6 months ago, I collected 20 students' papers 3 times in a week. I had 60 papers from one class that I had to deal with. I still have the same papers. They're just not on a piece of paper anymore. They're electronic sheets, if you will. So some things have changed and some things haven't changed, but the most important thing is in terms of time. This is crucial. So there are different kinds of online classes, and again, we have 100 teachers here today. I don't know what you're teaching in, so I'm going to describe 3 general formats, and I'm going to talk about how I teach at my university. And again, this may be different, but I'm just trying to give you paint the menu for you of what some of your options might be. So you can have what's called an asynchronous class. An asynchronous class it doesn't really have classes. An asynchronous class doesn't meet on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. We don't meet with Zoom. We don't meet live. An asynchronous class uses something called a course management system or a learning management system, LMS. So at my university, we use something called Canvas. There are many of these, many different brands of LMSs, of learning management systems, and everything is static. It's there, it sits on the computer, all right? So in this case, it will say week 7 on Sunday night. You go, you open it, it says read this, do these things, and it might say by Tuesday, post a discussion item, or it might say by Thursday, read other people's items and respond to what they've said, and then by Friday, write a summary. Now you can make it every day to have something due if you want, but the bottom line is that I don't have to be in that class because there is no class. It's just an area online where this information is stored. The opposite of an asynchronous class would be a synchronous class. Synchronous, where something's in sync, right? So a synchronous class, I will tell my students, we're meeting tonight, we're meeting Tuesday night at 7 p.m., from 7 p.m. until 8:15, and I'll give them the link. Instead of getting room 102 in this building, on this campus, they will get a link and they will go to that link. That's a synchronous class. And there's also a combination of the two, a mixed mode, and that's what I do at my university. This past semester, once we had COVID-19 and we had to cancel classes from meeting live, we went online. Well, I was not willing to do letter A. I did not want to do asynchronous only. I have taught classes asynchronously before. Some classes work out well that way. I personally don't believe that a language class where you're trying to learn to speak the language works well in letter A. Now, if you're only doing translations, if you're only doing literature, then maybe A is okay for you. If you're doing linguistics, maybe A is okay for you. But B, or some combination, in C is what you want for a conversation class or any kind of English class that has a lot of speaking and listening involved. Here's an example. This is my class. This is the class that I taught from January until May, TSL 3346, and it's called English as an International Language. This is a course for future English teachers. These are undergraduates, so they're only in their second or third year of the university. They're brand new to teaching, zero experience, and they're not sure where they want to teach exactly. So it's a class for people who want to teach English conversation, maybe internationally at some point. It's an undergraduate class. This past semester, in January till May, I had 63 students, and I had all kind of students. There were biology majors, history majors, English majors, etc. All right. So how did I teach this class? We use Canvas and we use Zoom. Canvas is one example of a learning management system. So you can Google Canvas and you'll see an example of what it is, or I'm going to give you my email address again, and I welcome questions from anybody. Please just let me know if you have questions about Canvas or what a learning management system is. So I arrange the course in weekly modules. So week 1, module 1, week 2, module 2, etc. I have many, many, many small assignments. So I used to walk into class and say, okay, class, just take out a sheet of paper and write 3 things about teaching in Bolivia. Why do you think it might be difficult to teach English to Spanish speakers in Bolivia, for example? All right. And they would write something. I didn't collect those papers. Well, in an online setting, those papers need to be collected and something has to be done with them. All right. I'll explain why in a little while. And I give a quiz before every class. If we have a class on Monday, when people come to class on Monday, whatever time it is, there's a quiz. And the quiz is before we do the material. Why? In an online class, and again, it's going to be a little different. I don't teach online. I mean, I teach a class, I organize a class, I lead a class, but I don't spend 40 minutes teaching a grammar point. I don't spend 30 minutes explaining the difference between how many and how much and count nouns and non-count nouns. We can't do that. That's inefficient teaching is what I believe that, and many people do. When you're teaching online, time is critical. Time is critical. Time in a class should be spent on activities. You can't benefit from these activities unless you really have done the material in advance. And so we try to take a lot of what would be normal classroom teaching and move it ahead of time. And then what do I do with Zoom? Zoom, I might do a brief lecture. Hey, remember we studied count and non-count nouns? And if I said that and I did 2 or 3 PowerPoint slides, excuse me, the next thing I would have would be I would have a PowerPoint that has the noun furniture. Is this count or non-count? I would have the word cats. Is this count or non-count, etc. So my point is I would do an activity almost immediately with count and non-count. It's not going to be me talking about count and non-count. In fact, what I'm doing right now in this presentation is bad online teaching, because today it's just really a speech at a conference, but you cannot lecture for 45 minutes. That's not good teaching online. Class activities and guest speakers. I usually have 2 or 3 guest speakers in the class. It is so much easier to bring guest speakers into class now. Hey, can you speak in my class next Tuesday night? And they have Zoom and I have Zoom. I give them the link and they appear. At 7:20, they speak for 15 minutes. My students ask them some questions and they leave. My students are thrilled at having an English speaker that they can talk to, or somebody who's not just English grammar. This is a person who might be, I don't know, a pilot for an airline, and they have a chance to interview a pilot, right? So again, I said earlier that teaching online is not all negative. Guest speakers, that's a really good advantage to having things online. I don't have to get a speaker to drive to my university, to find a parking place, to be there. It's just much, much easier online. All right, my idea 3 is about technology. So I said I've written 75 plus books, and my latest book is Teaching with Zoom. So if you're not sure what Zoom is a free app platform for teaching a large group online, okay? So Zoom has become very, very popular here in the United States, and I understand it's popular in other countries around the world as well. I'm not sure how popular it is or isn't in Argentina, but if you don't use Zoom, you have the equivalent of Zoom. I know you do, because that's the only way you're going to be able to teach a bunch of people together at one time effectively. So the book is available in English, and it's available in Spanish in just 2 more weeks. This book is coming out soon. So we have Enseñar con Zoom, all right? And really, this is a book written by me. I'm a teacher. So I didn't start with the technology. I started with what you see on idea 3. What do you want to do? You're a teacher. Forget about technology. Forget about COVID-19 for one moment. What do you want to do in your class? Oh, you have a long list. I will have to do this and this and this. Okay, we're not teaching in normal times. So take your list, make your list. And once you have your list, then I'm going to ask you to go back and take the same list. And now I want you to tell me, what do you have to do? What are the steps or the things that you listed that are absolutely necessary for teaching what you teach? So for example, if you teach a speaking class, I would say pair work or group work or something about students talking to each other is essential. This is not a wish thing. It's not a wish list kind of item. It's a necessity, all right? I show you the copies of Zoom, the Zoom book that I wrote, because one of the first chapters in the book asks you to do the exact task I told you just now. We're going to ask you to make a list of things that you normally do in your class. Forget about technology, forget about COVID for a moment, make your list, and then after you have your list, take your list and then cut your list to the bare necessities. And then let's use technology to figure out how to do those things. So for me, I want to check attendance, I want to talk to my whole class, I want to ask a question, I want to hear my students say something, I want to call on Maria and say, Maria, what do you think about number 4? I want Maria to be able to speak to me, I want the whole class to hear Maria, and I want to be able to show a PowerPoint and talk to the class, and many other things. So again, here are some of the activities that I think people might want to do. Teachers explain things. We have speaking activities, fill in the blank activities, error correction on a piece of paper. Each sentence has one error. Find the error and correct it. So for example, it says, Mary and John is home now. And of course, is wrong. They cut out the is and write the word are above it, right? An error correction or vocabulary. So I could have listed many other things, but I only have 40 minutes today to talk to you guys. So I just listed some of these things that I'm sure that our 100 teachers here today, everybody does some of those 5 things there. So the next idea, the yellow box is what we want to do. The yellow box is we want to explain something. So it's a grammar class. I want to explain am, is, are, very basic English class. And yeah, I want to do that, but then the situation is, if I'm going to do that, most of that has to happen before class. I know you can do some of this in class, but when you only have limited time with the students, we have to spend more time doing things and less time instructing. And this is a very, very difficult thing for a lot of teachers to do, including myself here. I'm running the show. Well, I'm guiding the show, but I'm not going to spend 40 minutes online with my students and use 30 of the 40 minutes explaining grammar. That would be inefficient teaching. So I'm going to make a video of myself, much as I'm doing today, make a video of myself explaining grammar, or don't, again, time. You don't have enough time to do that maybe. Go to the internet and you will find somebody has a video that you can use. There are many, many free videos on YouTube. Just find the video that you think is the best for your students. Again, I don't know your students. I don't know you. I don't know exactly what you're teaching. No one knows your situation better than you do. So it is your job, fortunately or unfortunately, to go to the internet and find a YouTube video or something similar where there's a teacher explaining am, is, are. Maybe it's in English, maybe it's in Spanish, whichever you decide, because again, no one knows your students better than you do. But most instruction is going to happen outside of class. Now, a speaking activity. I want my students to work in pairs. Well, yeah. So if you use Zoom, it's actually really easy. So in Zoom, I can have 40 students. I can have 100 students. If I had the 100 teachers that are in this conference right now today, the 100 people, with Zoom, I only need maybe 6 or 7 seconds to put 100 people in 50 pairs or in 25 groups of 4 or in 4 groups of 25. Well, I wouldn't put 25 people in a group because that's not a group, that's a class, right? But my point is, working in pairs or groups is actually easier online. It really is. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, I would suggest becoming familiar with Zoom a little bit or something like it. And again, you can write me at my email address at the end of the presentation. But in my opinion, working in pairs or groups is much easier online. I have read many surveys, questionnaires that students have done after they've been in a class online. I don't mean one class, I mean the whole course this last semester, January until May. You know the number one thing that students said they liked the best about the online class? It wasn't the teacher talking, which they didn't like us before maybe, right? But you know what they liked? They liked being in what Zoom calls breakout rooms. So the breakout room is 100 people, click, click, click is what I do. And I have 100 people now in 25 individual rooms of 4 people per room. And before they go, I will tell them, your job in that room is each of you needs to talk for maybe 30 seconds and tell what you did yesterday. 30 seconds. And if you don't know what to say, then say, I don't know what to say. Your job is to run your mouth, keep your mouth moving for 30 seconds. And then in the class, ask another student, your job is to be the timekeeper. And when if the person is silent, then everybody else should say, what else did you do? What else did you do? And so they're actually practicing, did you do? Did you verb? So just give them an exact sentence. What else did you do? After they start, what else did you do? And again, 30 seconds, keep going. Now, in the old days, also known as 2019, I used to do this all the time. And in an online setting, you can do it actually more easily. Idea 6 is a very important one. So idea 6 is worksheets, because I think that most teachers are accustomed to, here's a sheet of paper. It has 10 questions about am, is, are, or how many, how much, whatever your language point of the day is. You give students a worksheet. We ask them to do the worksheet. They fill it out, and then we check it together. Well, how am I going to do this online when nobody is near me? Well, first of all, there is no paper worksheet, but you can still do the worksheet. So what you do is, you see on the right-hand side over here where I have old, new idea, Google Docs. Now, I'm not very good at Google Docs. I'm getting better. I'm trying to be better at Google Docs, but Google Docs is your new best friend here. So you go to Google Docs, and that worksheet you had, you need to upload that worksheet to Google Docs, or retype it if you have the time, or whatever you need to do, get it into Google Docs. You'll have a link for it. And so what you tell the students is, before class, go to this link and download this sheet. So everybody can have this sheet. Or instead of downloading it, they can just access it maybe, and they can write on it. If they have to download it to their own Google first so they can write on it there. But it doesn't matter whether you're doing a fill-in-the-blank activity or an error correction on paper or any kind of traditional worksheet activity. Probably the number one activity that teachers are used to doing in class, besides teaching and having students talk, is worksheets, right? Some kind of written paper task. And so I'm here to tell you that you can easily do this in an online setting with Google Docs. Just you have the link, but don't give students the link now. Everybody here, go get this worksheet right now. You know how much time you will waste? And the students also maybe don't have the best internet connection. They will waste a lot of time trying to get that worksheet. Now, when you first do this, yes, it will be a problem because students will forget. But if you sit there and you wait, then you allow it to be a problem, right? My point is, first 2 or 3 times you do it, it's messy, but everybody, the teachers and the students, know that we're in a strange situation, and everybody needs to become accustomed to going into the Google Doc. I'll give you the link, go get it. Now, I also want to introduce a new app. It's called Aw App, AWWAPP, and Aw App is not really an app for your telephone the way it might sound. It's an application, but you go to Aw App and there's a free account. You can get a free account only for 14 days, I believe, but for me, this has been the biggest game changer. Why? Aw App, I can't open it right now to show you, but Aw App would be on my screen, and then suppose I have a, Jose Gonzalez gave me his paragraph. He wrote a paragraph with 5 sentences, and I want to make comments on Jose's paragraph right now. He sent it to me as a Word doc or as a PDF. It doesn't matter. Even as a JPEG, it doesn't matter. I have his doc on my screen. I can take that doc and I just pull it onto Aw App. There's no down. I'm not clicking anything. Just pull it and then place it. You'll see the place button. And when you do it, now you can expand it. You can shrink it. You can write on it. You can put circles. You can color different things. It's better. It's actually better than December 2019 before we had COVID. This is one of the. I love Aw App. Now, it's only free for 15 days. The cost per month is $8 US. And I'm not sure if that's within your budget or not. For me, it is within my budget. It has to be within my budget because it's a game changer for me in terms of teaching. I teach a lot of classes where students submit writing, and I want to look at their writing together. Now, if I were just doing a speaking class, maybe Aw App wouldn't be such a big deal, although it's good for speaking classes as well. If you're teaching a low-level class, you want to teach names of fruit, apple, orange, banana, watermelon, etc., and you have a chart where you have all these photos, you can actually just pull the photos into, just drag it like that into Aw App, and then you can draw arrows and have students, okay, now you can share the board with the students, and the students can actually go and buy each fruit, number the fruit from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I say, Maria, you're number 1, Jose, you're number 2, Jorge, you're number 3, and then Jorge's job is to go to number 3 and write B-A-N-A-N-A, write out the word banana, right? So you could have 10 people working on one thing at the same time. Now, I don't make any money from Aw App. I'm just saying, for me, it's been one of the best things I've found in the past month. This is still very new to me. 40 years of teaching, and I'm learning new things all the time. So, again, idea number 6 is very important. You'll have the ability to access this video later, I imagine, and then stop it and write down some of these things. I know I'm speaking rather fast. I apologize for that, but my goal today is to give you 10 different ideas in a relatively short period of time. So bear with me, please. Thank you. Idea number 7 is about vocabulary, right? So with vocabulary, first of all, use the internet. Just Google vocabulary activities for body parts, vocabulary activities, fruit, in English or ESL or whatever it is. You will find that teachers, this is not because of COVID, this is before COVID. So if I were teaching with Zoom, what I could do is the students could do this in advance, or in class, I could just open that website, open the exercise, and have students do this right now together. Now, in Zoom, for example, or whatever, you might be using some kind of synchronous platform right now, when I put 100 people in 25 rooms, you can't see the board anymore. So what I tell students to do is, okay, you see this worksheet right now, the 3 or 4 items? Take your phone, and everybody take a photo. Take a photo of what you have right now, and in a moment, you'll be able to refer to that photo. You can also do a screenshot, do a quick screenshot, screencast of what's on the screen, but a lot of people are not so good about going in and out of screenshots and then the PowerPoint or whatever you're showing the Zoom and back and forth. So what I always tell people, in my experience, everybody's got a phone almost sitting right there, right? So just take your phone, take a picture, go ahead and take a picture of what's on the screen. When you get to the breakout room, the conversation room where there's 4 of you, you can't see each other, I can't see you. I can go visit each of those rooms, but you can't see the main classroom, all right? That is one of the negatives of using Zoom, but there are ways to get around it. Have people take a photo. The second thing is, here's a really cool idea. You're doing new vocabulary. Just tell each student, your job next Tuesday when we start, Maria, your job is, there's a word, the word is adequate. The word is adequate. It's on page 139. That's your word. So you should model one time. Make one PowerPoint slide, have the word adequate, put it in Spanish if you want, put the pronunciation, do whatever you want, and then ask the students to model what you've done. And then tell the students that you can only have one PowerPoint slide, but you can put lots of graphics if you want. All right? And then maybe at the end, we're going to have students vote on which student came up with the best PowerPoint slide, the best explanation, the best examples, the best activity for the word adequate or whatever it was. Each student gets one different word, and maybe you can start the class each day by saying, okay, now Jorge, what is your word? And Jorge can start. You can actually give the screen to Jorge, and Jorge can then share his screen. Or Jorge could submit his slide in advance, and you could project it. There are different ways of doing that. Again, if you have any questions about some of this technology, please feel free to send me an email. Idea 8. As I told you earlier, I give a quiz, or it's called a quiz. It's not a quiz. It's a little test, but you can take the test 3 times. You can use your book. There's no time limit. You can use the internet. You might say, oh my gosh, this is not really testing anything. The purpose of this quiz before class is not to test. The purpose of the quiz is to make sure you, the student, do something before you come to class. I told you I've been teaching for 40 years. About 10 years ago, I started doing this because I have these classes that are, even my face-to-face classes have an online shell at my university. So even though we're meeting before COVID face-to-face, you had to go online and do this quiz. And what if you didn't do the quiz before the class began at 2 p.m.? Well, you got a 0. That's it. It's that simple. But the quiz could be taken. This is how I normally do it. You read the material, you take a quiz. If you don't like your score, take it again. If you don't like your score, take it again. And you might say, and by the way, only your highest score counts. You might say, well, gee, they'll get a 100. The goal is to get 100. The goal is to get 90%. The goal is for me to see if somebody got 60 and stopped. If somebody got 60 and didn't try 2 more times, and this person has trouble in class, this is not a Keith Foltz problem. And I want you to remember that because of what I said on one of the very first slides, time. You now have 2 brand new jobs. Students need to step up to the plate and do their job. And your job is to take this quiz by reading the material. Even if you don't read the material, if you do the quiz 3 times, you should be able to get a pretty high score. Again, it's not about the score. It's about the fact that the student has interacted with the material before we have the synchronous class online. All right? Some things are better online. They really are better. So what could be better online, you might say? Well, I've got 4 things that are better online. I've taught online now for 9 years, 10 years almost. And I will tell you this. Before I taught online, I would teach a class. I would teach that same class the next year or the next semester, and I never used what I had already because I couldn't find the file, I couldn't find the folder, I couldn't find the PowerPoint. I wanted to redo the PowerPoint. I tell you what, when you teach online, everything you do right now is there. So the second time you teach it, it's just making it better. By the 3rd or 4th time you teach it, you won't be doing much at all except just teaching the class. And it actually would then be a really, really good class. So I think the best analogy here, I heard a colleague recently talk about pancakes. And she said that she had a professor of pedagogy once who told her that teaching as a beginner, and all of us are teaching online as beginners, teaching as a beginner online is like making pancakes. Remember the first time you made pancakes, or you made empanadas, because we're in Argentina, or whatever you made? The first time you made it, probably it wasn't so good, right? The empanada was wet, or it was crunchy and inside. Have you had the empanadas where it's crunchy on the outside and you open it like, where's the meat? Where's the potatoes, right? So the point is, teaching online is kind of like making pancakes for the first time. The first time you do it, it's not so good, and the second time you do it, it's better, but it's still not so good. The person eating the pancakes, if they've never had pancakes before, might say, oh my gosh, these are the best things ever. And I'm thinking, these are really bad pancakes. But you don't know, right? Your students don't know about teaching online. They're also new at this. Remember that. It's not just teachers. Students are new also. So the 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year, or 3rd time you teach it, it is easier. Guest speakers, I already mentioned, if you want to bring in guest speakers, it's really easy to do that. I will also tell you, if you ever need a university student to be a guest speaker for 15 or 20 minutes, you write me an email. Because I have students at my university who need, we call it conversation hour. They need to do practice with non-native speakers of English. And they would love to do this with your class in Argentina or wherever you happen to be today. Zoom breakout rooms. I told you, when in Zoom or whatever you're using for your synchronous part of teaching, there are these breakout rooms, these conversation rooms, if you will. Students are doing group work by themselves. Students in questionnaires report that they love the breakout rooms. Now, you might think, I'm sitting here for 7 minutes, 17 minutes doing nothing. The students are in the breakout rooms. But if you have given the students a very specific task and told them exactly what to do, and don't give them 30 minutes. I always give students an odd number, like you have 9 minutes. People like 9, oh my gosh, what's 9? If you say 10 minutes, that just sounds like blah, blah, blah. Don't say 10, don't say 15, don't say 20 is way too long. I'm gonna do 7 minutes or 3 minutes. You might think 4 people can't get anything accomplished in 3 minutes. You'll be surprised at what people do if they feel the time crunch. You do that. And then class recordings. So when students can't come to class or students have a bad internet connection and they're not being lazy, they just can't hear you today. Or as I'm speaking right now, if you hear my voice doubling or there's any kind of technical problem, if the class is recorded, then the students can go ahead and use that recording later on. That's better. In the old days, if you had asked me to record every single class that I do, I would have thought you were crazy. And I would say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too much work. Now, just hit the record button, okay? So, conversation partners for speaking classes. I'm at the University of Central Florida, and my future English teachers need to do we call conversation hours with students. So their service hours is what we call helping the community. Here in Orlando, we have many people who don't speak English in the community, mostly Spanish speakers, Haitian Creole, French speakers, Russian speakers as well. And so my students work with those different students to help them learn English, to practice their English conversation skills. If you ever need a conversation partner online, please write me. I think I've said that 10 times already. Please write me. Send me an email. I'm happy to connect my students with you. And I don't begin classes again until September, or just so you'll keep that in mind. Now, the last thing I did 10 today is time. So one of the problems in teaching online with Zoom or whatever you're using is everything takes longer. What used to take 5 minutes takes 8 minutes. What used to take 2 minutes takes 5 minutes. I don't quite know why. I'm not sure if it's me, the students, or a combination of the two, or what's happening, but everything just seems to take more time. So I don't have a lot of time. So how can I reduce my workload a little bit? Here's 2 things I do. And again, this is in Canvas. And so if you have a chance, if you have a Facebook page for your, something as simple as a Facebook page where your students go or something like that, then I would start 2 areas there. One area is called Raise My Hand. So if a student wants to know, do we have a test tomorrow? Do we have to do page 37 and 38 or just 37? Don't email me. If you went in class, you would not in class in December. You would not stop the class and walk up to the teacher and have a private conversation with the teacher before in December, right? So don't do it now unless it's an emergency. And the homework question is not an emergency. That in December last year, you would have raised your hand and asked a question. So I have a place in my course called Raise My Hand. And that's where you can see 15 students have gone there to post a question. Is there really a test tomorrow? Is there a mistake with something? All right. And then we also have one called Zoom or Tech Issues. So I know technology a little bit, but I don't know technology a lot. So if students have a technology issue, I am not the best person to ask. So what they should do is post it there. Why? Because many students in the class, they're certainly younger than I am, many of those students do know technology better than I do. Now, I have, for example, my phone here. I don't have an iPhone, all right? So I have a Samsung, and so you might have a question, hey, I was trying to watch the video of you explaining Amias R on my iPhone, and I had a problem, and well, I don't have an iPhone. I know nothing about iPhones except that I don't have one, all right? So in this case, asking me about this, if you ask me, I'm going to have to tell you blah, 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 then I'm going to have to ask somebody else. So to solve this problem faster, just post it in the Zoom issue, because there are, I'm sure half the class maybe has an iPhone. And since they have iPhones, somebody will volunteer to help you there. Now, if you want to give people an incentive, you can say, I'm going to give extra points at the end of the class, end of the course, to the people who helped people the most in these 2 areas. You'll be surprised at how many students want extra points, and we'll do this for you. All right, so that's the end of my talk today. So I've given you 10 different ideas here, And I think I just want to leave you with several thoughts here. First, there's my email, keith.fultz@gmail.com. Please feel free to send me an email and tell me if you have any questions or you have some comments, questions about anything, teaching English online. If you want to get conversation partners, you want a guest speaker for your class, whatever you want me to help you with, please, 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 just let me know. I'm here to help people, okay? And then I do have the book. If you can order, if you go to Amazon, there's a paper version which takes a long time to get, but you can also get a Kindle version which is a lot cheaper. It's just a few dollars. I think it's maybe $5, under $5 for a Kindle version of this book. So with that, I'm going to stop today. And again, I want to wish all of you luck as you're teaching your English classes going forward. And thanks again to the U.S. Embassy and to the staff there who have helped to make this possible today. The organizers of this conference, thank you so much. I've been in Tucumán before. I'm not there. I would love to be in Tucumán again one day. So maybe after this is over, I'll see you guys in Argentina again. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
Keith Fultz, realmente increíble lo que se ha vivido. Profesor, nos imaginamos, ¿no? La emoción también de lo que hablamos también en la entrevista temprano, que tiene que ver con toda esta capacitación.
La verdad que sí, la verdad que estamos llegando a este final, ¿no? De este bloque exclusivo para los profesores de inglés en este caso, y ojalá que hayan podido disfrutar de la misma manera en que nosotros hemos disfrutado organizándolo, porque fue un bloque exclusivo, pensado, diseñado, con temáticas relevantes, con sponsors que la verdad que sin ellos no hubiésemos podido avanzar como lo hicimos hasta ahora. Les quiero mencionar Trinity College London, Winter International Academy y the US Embassy. Gracias, muchas gracias.
Muy amable. Y tenemos un correo electrónico también del conferencista para aquellas personas que quieran comunicarse, estar en contacto con él, para que puedan también intercambiar datos, como ya lo explicó el profesor, ¿no?
Sí, el correo, te lo digo, es kiss.fultz@gmail.com para que puedan contactarse con él a través de su correo electrónico. Y no se olviden, a partir de este momento ya se encuentra habilitada la evaluación online, pero no se desesperen porque tienen tiempo para realizarla hasta el 7 de agosto inclusive. Y esta jornada va a estar colgada vía web, vía todas las plataformas que tenemos hasta las 23:59 de este día.
Exactamente, así llegamos a finalizar ya con este congreso, con este quinto bloque de lenguas extranjeras inglés. Realmente queremos agradecer al gobierno de la provincia de Tucumán, al gobernador Mansur, a su equipo también del Poder Ejecutivo, al ministro de Educación de la provincia, Juan Pablo Littmayer, por toda la tarea que ha realizado el equipo del Ministerio de Educación para lograr este congreso en su cuarta edición.
Por supuesto, a toda la parte de organización que trae esto, ¿no? Porque no es fácil toda la parte ejecutiva que hay que hacer para llegar a cada uno de los hogares. Agradecerles a todos y a cada uno de los docentes de la provincia de Tucumán por estar ahí atrás haciéndonos el aguante, a todos los docentes de toda la Argentina, por supuesto a los disertantes que estuvieron participando también, siempre aquí en la provincia de Tucumán, en este cuarto Congreso Internacional de Educación.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, profe.
Muchas gracias.
Un placer, Kate. Un placer como siempre. Nosotros queremos decir gracias a todos, por supuesto, a los que hicieron que este congreso sea una tendencia a nivel Argentina, a nivel internacional, en los medios digitales. Nos vamos a encontrar, Dios mediante, el próximo año.
Así será. Si Dios quiere, hasta el año que viene.
Gracias.